Morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the December 6, 2018 State Board of Education meeting. I'm Eric Davis, Chair of the Board, and I call this meeting to order. We want to welcome all board members, advisors, staff, on-site visitors, online listeners, and Twitter followers. I remind the audience and those listening that this body meets monthly with its official meeting scheduled for the first Thursday of the month. Committee meetings were held on Wednesday prior to the official meeting day, and as was the case yesterday when the board met to discuss its committee agenda items. I remind our on-site visitors and online listeners that you can follow the meeting online and see all of our materials by going to the State Board of Education Meetings tab at www.ncpublicschools.org. Board members, you're reminded that it's our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record, and if during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. At this time, would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We now come to our special recognitions, a time on our agenda when we recognize those educators, schools, local school systems, or advisors for outstanding achievement and honors. At this time, I'll call on Ms. Christy Lynch-Ebert to introduce the Presidential Awards for Excellence in Mathematics and Science, in addition to the Blue Ribbon Award recipients. And following the presentations, I'd ask each group to come forward for a photo with the board. Ms. Lynch-Ebert.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Chairman Davis, Vice Chairman Duncan, members of the board, and members in the audience. Thank you for the honor and pleasure to recognize our outstanding educators and our outstanding schools at today's board meeting. I would like to introduce Mr. Joseph Reaper. He's one of our mathematics consultants here at DPI, and he will share with you about the Presidential Awards for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching and recognize our North Carolina teacher recipients for this honor.
Chairman Davis, Vice Chairman Duncan, State Board of Education members, and honored guests. As the state coordinator for the Presidential Awards, it gives me great pleasure to present to you the 2018 North Carolina finalists and the 2016 national awardees from North Carolina for the Presidential Awards for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching. The Presidential Awards for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching is the highest recognition that teachers in the STEM fields of science, technology, engineering, math, and computer science may receive for outstanding teaching in the United States. Enacted by Congress in 1983, this program authorizes the President to bestow up to 108 awards each year. The National Science Foundation administers the Presidential Awards on behalf of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. Up to 2 awardees will be announced for each of the 50 states and the 4 U.S. jurisdictions that include the U.S. territories and the Department of Defense Education Activity Schools. In 2018, the National Awards will focus on teachers from the STEM fields in grades K through 6. We are here today to honor the 6 finalists and the 2 awardees from North Carolina for this national award. These teachers are recognized for their skills as educators with a focus on growing students and developing a passion for STEM fields. In addition to honoring individual achievement, the goal of this awards program is to exemplify the highest standards of teaching. Our finalists serve as models for their colleagues, inspirations for their communities, and leaders in the improvement of STEM education. These teachers are leaders not only in their classroom, but in their school district and across the state. The 2018 national finalists for the Presidential Awards for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching are Rebecca Christie, Rebecca teaches at Teresa C. Burnham Elementary School in Cumberland County Schools in the Sand Hills District 4.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Let's see, I think the board needs to come forward, or the district representative. How about
It's
that?
Cumberland.
Yeah. That'd be Dr. Eisenberg.
Libby.
Alan?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations. Thanks for coming.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Our next finalist in the area of K-6 mathematics is Elizabeth Gilligan. Elizabeth teaches at Smyrna Elementary School from Carteret County Public Schools in Southeast District 2.
Congratulations.
Our next finalist in the area of K-6 mathematics is Sarah Patterson. Sarah teaches at Lake Norman Charter Elementary School in Huntersville, North Carolina, in the Southwest District 6. All right, our next finalist in the area of K-6 science is Nancy Bullard. Nancy teaches at Huntingtown Farms Elementary School and the Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools in Southwest District 6.
So he gets his exercise.
Around here.
Give him pose this time.
There we go. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you.
Our next finalist in the area of K-6 science is Andrea Gladden. Andrea teaches at Eichert Elementary School and Burke County Schools in Northwest District 7.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. Great.
Okay, and our next finalist in K-6 science is Catherine Matthews. Catherine teaches at Valley Cruz School and Watauga County Schools in Northwest District 7.
Great work. Congratulations. Thank you.
The national awardees are announced on the timing and at the behest of the White House. The difficulty in creating such a schedule sometimes means the announcement of the national awardees is delayed. With us today are the 2016 national awardees of the Presidential Awards for North Carolina, which were publicly announced in June of this year. These presidential awardees receive a citation signed by the President of the United States, a trip to Washington, D.C., which did occur in June of this year, to attend a series of recognition events and professional development opportunities, and a $10,000 award from the National Science Foundation. The 2016 national awardees for the Presidential Awards for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching are Heather Landreth, Heather teaches at W.H. Robinson Elementary School and Pitt County Schools in Northeast District 1. And our second awardee for the year 2016 is Laura Juliana Thomas. Juliana teaches at the Explorer School in Raleigh, North Carolina, in North Central District 3. The finalists and awardees have already been recognized by the North Carolina Council for the Teachers of Mathematics and the North Carolina Science Teachers Association at their annual conferences in November. The recognition will continue at a luncheon this afternoon at the Burroughs Welcome Fund, where they will receive further recognition from the Association of the State Supervisors of Mathematics, the Council of State Science Supervisors, and the National Science Foundation. Thank you for taking the time to honor some of North Carolina's best teachers.
What a wonderful thing to celebrate today. We're now going to move into the National Blue Ribbon Schools Program recognitions. This has been in place since 1982. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos recognized 349 schools as National Blue Ribbon Schools for 2018, based on their overall academic excellence or their progress in closing achievement gaps among subgroups. These schools demonstrate that all students can achieve to high levels. The department formally recognized the 300 public and 49 private schools at an awards ceremony in Washington, D.C. on December 7th and 8th, 2018. The 2018 cohort represent public and non-public elementary, middle, and high schools, including traditional, charter, magnet, parochial, and independent schools in 47 states, the District of Columbia, and Department of Defense Education Activity Schools. The National Blue Ribbon Schools Award affirms the hard work of students, educators, families, and communities in creating safe and welcoming schools where students master challenging content. The National Blue Ribbon Schools flag gracing a school's building is a widely recognized symbol of exemplary teaching and learning. National Blue Ribbon Schools are an inspiration and a model for schools still striving for excellence. Now in its 36th year, the U.S. Department of Ed has bestowed this coveted award on more than 8,800 schools. At this time, I would like to recognize the 8 North Carolina National Blue Ribbon Schools. I will name each school and ask its representatives to move forward to the front of the boardroom. Following the verbal recognition of each school, they will have their pictures taken with members of the State Board of Education. We will begin with Clement Elementary School of Sampson County Schools, where Dr. Eric Bracey is superintendent, and we have attending to accept the award Mr. James Bo Mullins, the principal, Miss Sue Matthews, who is a teacher at Clement, and Miss Susan McPhail, who is also a teacher at Clement Elementary.
Thank you so much.
Our next Blue Ribbon School is Eastover Central Elementary School of Arts of Cumberland County Schools, where Dr. Marvin Connolly, Jr. is superintendent, and they are represented today by Dr. Connolly, Mr. Ashley Porter, who is the principal, Ms. Stacy Jackson, assistant principal, Ms. Jennifer Butler, school counselor, Ms. Chelsea Graham, who is a teacher at the school, as well as Ms. Kelly Osmorio, a teacher at the school, and Ms. Michelle Plesser, who's an instructional coach at Eastover. Congratulations, Eastover Elementary. Our next Blue Ribbon School is Glenn C. Marlowe Elementary School of Henderson County Schools, where Mr. Bo Caldwell is superintendent. And attending to accept the award, we have Mr. Bo Caldwell, as well as Mr. John E. Hart III, who is principal at Glenn C. Marlowe. Congratulations. Our next school was unable to have representation today, but I would like to recognize Haywood Early College of Haywood County Schools, where Dr. Bill Nolte is superintendent, for receiving this award. Our next school is Kitty Hawk Elementary School of Dare County Schools, where Dr. John Farley is superintendent. We have Superintendent Farley, Mrs. Sandy Kinzel, who's the assistant superintendent, as well as Dr. Greg Florence, who is the principal at the school, and Mr. Keith Parker, Director of Digital Communication. Congratulations, Kitty Hawk.
Oh, gosh.
Big territory region.
Our next Blue Ribbon School is Socrates Academy, which is a charter school in Matthews, North Carolina, where Miss Sandra Brighton is principal. And attending to accept the award, we have the founder and board president, Larry Perulas. We have the assistant founder and founder and vice president, Dr. Tony Stilianu. And we have Miss Sandra Brighton, principal, to accept the award. Congratulations, Socrates Academy. Do we have a representative from the STEM Early College? Okay. Our next recipient is the STEM Early College at NCA&T of Guilford County Schools. Dr. Sharon Contreras is superintendent, and attending to accept the award is Ms. Jamisa Williams, who is principal at the school. Congratulations. final National Blue Ribbon School is W.J. Gerganis Elementary School of Craven County Schools, where Dr. Megan Doyle is superintendent. If they will come forward, please. Dr. Doyle is here to accept the award along with Miss Debbie Jean Hurst, who is the principal of the school. Congratulations, Gerganis Elementary School.
Craven?
I thought Craven was there.
Oh, no.
They'll enjoy having you.
21
Hold the call.
Thank you so much. We're happy to be celebrating something. Yeah.
Again, it is such a privilege to recognize our National Blue Ribbon schools as well as our Math and Science Presidential Award recipients. It is so joyful to be able to recognize outstanding educators and schools in our state. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Lynch Ebert. You know, to borrow a saying that we just heard, you know, it's nice to celebrate something. And there's nothing better to celebrate than outstanding educators, terrific schools and school systems. And we have them all over North Carolina. In fact, I feel like we're covered in blue ribbons. But we really appreciate the extra effort that these educators and schools have put forward, and they are well deserving of these awards. And they just highlight the professionalism and superior education that is being delivered every day in schools across North Carolina. So congratulations to these schools and educators for representing all of North Carolina. So at this time, we're going to celebrate, we're going to have another celebration, and we're going to recognize a wonderful woman of wisdom and insight who personally I've learned so much from, and I believe every member, one of my colleagues would share that same sentiment. A terrific advisor, a great education leader, a steadfast local board member, and our advisor, Ms. Roberta Scott. Ms. Scott, will you come forward?
Supposed to do?
Whatever you want to do.
Well, I certainly, first of all, I would like to say good morning to one and all, to our chairman, Davis, to our vice chair, Allen. All right. And to all of the board here. You know, it's kind of hard to think that I'm ever unable to speak. But, you know, when somebody gives you such a warm build-up, then you get here and you're ready just to emotionally collapse. But I sincerely would like to say it has indeed been an absolute honor as well as a pleasure for serving as advisor on this board for a year. I'm not ready to go. I am ready to stay right here and to continue. But one thing I really want to say in earnest, that this board has every one of our darling children in North Carolina in their hearts. They want to do just what is the best for North Carolina schools, especially the children. And if you're doing what's best for the children, it's going to be fine for everybody else in the system. And sincerely, I thank you. And if anyone doesn't know, I'm from little old Warren County. And I said to someone recently, like this week since I've been here, that it's so hard for me to imagine and think back that this old girl right here, back in the day when I was growing up in less than the high rent district of Washington, D.C., and I am a Washingtonian, but now I'm a North Carolinian, you know? I'm a Tar Heel, I got a combination. Would ever be in the position that I am in now or in the positions that I have been over the years. And at this time, I said this morning, I'm kind of winding down, and my colleagues say, oh no, you're not yet, you're not winding down. But I would like to share with you that I have learned a lot. And my brains are still soaking in, even though I am on the north side of life. I'm definitely in my winter years. And everybody gets upset with me when I do this. A lot of people do. But I'm not going to tell you my age. But what I am going to do is to give you an opportunity to do the math. Okay? So I was born in 1939. So I have been through a lot of great experiences in my lifetime. And I'm still going through more. I still drive. I still travel. I still do anything that I am able to do. And I am very, very grateful to be where I am and to be almost a milestone year of age. So I thank you. I thank you so much. I leave my children in your hands, and I just know that you're going to make all of the positives for them. Thank you so much for everything. I have to know who is who. I'm gonna miss you. I'm gonna miss you.
She's come on back.
I come back every time. Come back every time. Amy, where are you?
Right beside you, we don't have to fight anymore.
Thank you.
God, be 80 years.
I'm sorry, are you going feet on the ground?
So, so Roberta, there's no way we're gonna be able to forget you. And in fact, you have a standing invitation, a reserved seat anytime in this room that we're meeting or anyone else is meeting. But just something that you can take back to Little Warren County to hopefully remember us with this and take with you our sincere appreciation, our respect, and our admiration for you. So, okay, thank you. You know, just one more shining example about what's great in North Carolina. Ms. Roberta Scott, thank you. Okay, now we'll move to a new agenda item. On November 30th, 2018, an executive committee of this board met to discuss and decide on the first disbursements from the board's established North Carolina Education Fund for FAST-NC applicants. The FAST-NC's FAST, which stands for Florence Aid to Students and Teachers, by the way. Steering committee members include former State Superintendent June Atkinson and Mike Ward, Henry Johnson, and Phil Kirk, who are with us today. And so at this time, we'd like to share a brief update about FAST-NC and then reward the three districts who have been awarded grants. So as you know, FAST-NC was established as a supplemental method of helping students and teachers recover from Hurricane Florence and later from Hurricane Matthew. This effort was intended to not replace but add to the aid that will be provided by local, state, and federal government, as well as through insurance sources. And it's really a testament to the giving nature of North Carolinians that we receive such a positive response to this effort. And I give great credit to Mike Ward for being the instigator of this effort and for being the spirit behind it and really the driving force. And it's a great display, more than of just bipartisanship, but of the degree of caring that we all share as North Carolinians. So at this time, I'd like to call on Mr. Johnson to come forward and give us a brief update on the status of FAST NC, and then I'll turn to Mr. Kirk to announce the grant recipients.
Good morning. Good morning. Chair Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, and other board members, it's a pleasure working with you, and we really appreciate your support in this effort. Phil Kirk and I flipped a coin to see who would go next, and I lost. No, it's really been wonderful working with Mike, Theo, whom I've known for a long time, Mr. Davis, who I've met recently, and the others. This is a very, very worthwhile endeavor, and I am pleased to report, my part is to give an update, so I'm very happy to report that FAST has received $78,000 in donations. When we initially talked to you, we were around 55 or 6,000. During last week's call session of the General Assembly, our legislature unanimously approved an additional $350,000 to be used by FAST in meeting the needs of students and school staff in the impacted counties. And as Mike said, you can do some good stuff with $350,000, so we plan to do good things. But that's not all. FAST has over 30 partner organizations who've pitched in and who've helped spread the word, and they're doing some wonderful and amazing things. And here are a few highlights. Member congregation of the North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church across eastern North Carolina are taking special offerings to assist with this effort, and they have collected $68,000. The Charlotte Rotary has donated $6,000 to FAST. This year's Conference on Exceptional Children featured FAST as an opportunity for charitable giving and support for colleagues and students in hurricane-impacted area. And NC Mass donated 2,160 scientific calculators to schools in the impacted area. The North Carolina Foundation for Public School Children has raised thousands of dollars for hurricane response. And this is the short list. We're grateful for all of our partners and colleagues and for what they are doing. And we're even more grateful for what teachers and volunteers in the hurricane-impacted areas of our state are doing every day to provide a quality education for students in North Carolina. Thank you so much for your help.
Thank you.
Phil.
Thank you, Chair Davis and Vice Chair Duncan and distinguished members of the State Board and a few others who, you know who you are, and I won't call out the names that aren't in that category. I decided not to tell any stories this morning, but then standing watching all those pictures taken, I was reminded of one. One time we did, well, every meeting we did a similar thing, and I was standing up one time and State Treasurer Harlan Bowles yelled at me, "Button your coat." And I said, "It won't." And so every other meeting of the State Board, I remember to check and be sure I had a coat. This morning I didn't check to see whether this one was buttoned or not. JB, don't ask me to button mine. But seriously, today we're very pleased to award the first round of checks and honored to have the first three recipients present today for an early Christmas present. First is a grant, and you want me to call all three out and then we'll do the pictures?
Yes,
So I don't
please.
have to go back and forth 3 times.
Yes. We don't want you to get that much exercise.
I know. Well, I was concerned about Henry too. He wanted to go after me today, so he said he could correct my mistakes, and also if I said anything bad about him, he would tell the truth about me. But first is a grant application submitted by Dawn Kraft, Executive Director
of Administrative Services, and Dr. Austin Obashan. I call him Dr. O because I always know I'll mess up the name. By the way, I do want to interject that I first met Dr. O when he was a principal in Concord in Cabarrus County. I think he may have been a principal of Concord Middle School, but I know it was a school. And the way I met him was that I was asked by the White House to arrange a visit for President George W. Bush at a North Carolina school within an hour of the Charlotte airport. So ended up in Cabarrus County, and the superintendent chose Concord Middle School, and that's where Dr. O was the principal at the time. And then he went south to become a superintendent, and then he returned to North Carolina a number of years ago as the Duplin County superintendent. The steering committee recommended and the state board approved $14,000 to replace 35 K2 instructional rugs, which was determined to be a very important asset or contribution to learning, particularly of young children. Second is a request from Dr. Christopher Barnes, principal of White Oak High School, and Onslow County Superintendent Rick Stout. They had planned to be with us this morning. However, Governor Cooper is at their school this morning, and for some reason they thought they needed to be there. So, but they were afraid we wouldn't mail the check. So we're pleased to welcome White Oak Assistant Principal Kelly Warren and Onslow Deputy Superintendent Beth Folger. The state board approved $14,000 to replace destroyed science supplies and materials. Third is a request from Dr. Todd Blumenreich, Chief Officer for Organizational Development, and Pender County Superintendent Stephen Hill. The state board approved $14,000 for teachers and teacher assistants to use to replace instructional materials and supplies. The steering committee has approved several more grants in round 2, which will be awarded very soon. Round 3 applications are due by December 14th. Round 4 applications will be received from December 15th through January the 11th. Fundraising in dollars and contributions of books and other supplies will continue. So if you haven't made your contribution yet, it would be a good time to do it before the end of the year. By the way, as I told you last time, I took 25% of what I was going to spend on each child and each grandchild and gave to this fund, and I'm not real popular with them right now, but I'm especially trying to explain it to a 4-year-old, 5-year-old. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Please come forward.
Was it Concord?
We're going to do Duplin first, Chairman.
Smaller people up front, guys, remember.
Y'all are in the middle.
Get that move on. Sounds good to me.
Button your coat, Phil.
I'm not going to try.
There's somebody back behind me.
Congratulations. Yeah. So excited. Really not following directions.
James, Olivia, we got three, we got two more.
Apparently we weren't paying attention. Yes.
The whole board.
Yes, I'm with you.
Oh, it was 3 different pictures. Okay.
Glad to see you.
Get some
Hendricks, come on.
time and a half. You know the drill. Full-time job.
That is a full-time job.
That's good.
And that means you do repairs. Anybody move? So excited.
Good to see you. Okay, who's got Pender?
I know.
I had a drop. I made up half the stuff, so it's pretty
I'm agnostic on it, as long as it works. But they may have some interesting, there may be some,
Now, we're finished.
Ernest took some more than mine.
Does he have anything to do with?
Thanks again for all your work.
Well, again, our thanks to the, yes, Reggie. Mr. Keenan has the floor.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd like to take a minute to just, if I may, say a couple good things about Dr. Abasahan, who's our superintendent. I just want to take this moment to say that in life, you have sometimes meet good people, great people, and we were fortunate enough to, years ago, to hire Dr. Abasahan as our superintendent, and he has done so much for our county. He has been a blessing. One thing I want to tell you about Dr. Abasahan, he's a man of faith. That throughout his tenure as our superintendent, he has brought the community together, very much together because of his faith. We have a very strong religious connection with all the churches. He emphasized that very much. He's a person that loved people, but then he loved his children. I try to get him to go home sometimes. He works too hard. I tell him that. But he has that passion to make life better for everyone. And we talk a lot. We talk about faith a lot. But I just want you to know that he's a wonderful, wonderful person. He's a better person than he is a superintendent. So, which is great to be said. I just want to say those good things for him because you never meet a person any more special than Dr. Abasahan.
Oh, Mr. Keenan, that's a pretty tall order because he's a pretty fine superintendent. But, you know, at the same time, I can see why the two of y'all are such good friends because you share so many similar qualities. So thank you for highlighting that. Okay, moving along. So unfortunately, the Secretary of the Board and Superintendent Johnson is not in attendance today, but he did prepare a few brief remarks that are part of his report, and it's posted on eBoard that I'll call to your attention at this time. So as you know, the statutes establish training requirements for the board, and we participate in issues sessions during board meetings to fulfill that statutory duty and discussing matters that may have policy implications. Today's issue session focuses on the Transformation Committee work that is part of the strategic plan and overall improvements and transformation that is ongoing in our school system. And we are delighted that this effort is led in large part by our Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Maria Petrie Martin, who I'll call on now to give us an update on two of the recommendations. Dr. Petrie Martin.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And greetings to our chair, vice chair, our members, advisors, and to all those assembled. It is once again an honor to stand before you and discuss the next EY recommendation that we will be bringing forward to you and to the Department of Public Instruction. So recommendation number 8 of the Ernst & Young report, which was delivered to us May 1st of this year, discusses improvement strategy to combine educator talent-related functions into a single end-to-end talent division. We know that the recommendations from the EY report started with recommendation number 6 as the first strategy for implementation, and I will give you a very brief overview of that recommendation in a few minutes, but recommendation number 8 will certainly be the next one. This is the chart that we show every time we discuss the transformation efforts here at the department, and again we are focused on recommendation number 8 of the 18 recommendations. This particular recommendation really focuses on the importance of knowing that employees are the most vital and important asset in any organization. So we're not only focusing on the talent within DPI, but this is also a focus on ensuring that our school districts and our charter schools have the teacher supports they need in order to have the best teachers for our students across the state. So when Ernst & Young did their interviews with educators from across the state, they certainly heard that many of our teacher supports are spread out across the department in at least 3 different teams within the department. And so, of course, being spread out across the department has created unnecessary confusion and frustration among teachers when they are attempting to get supports. Therefore, we need to create a single educator talent function that draws many of the support services together into one unit so that we can have more coordination, we can have better support, and then we will bring value to the field. So this is our current org chart. Of course, it's very difficult to see from this viewpoint, but of course you have the slides in front of you. And I want to recognize that this effort is going to be under educator recruitment and support on our organizational chart that is before you. Tom Tomberlin has just been named the director for this unit of work. So I wanted to establish that as we move forward. So today, I'm going to give you an update that is really based on our change management efforts here in the department. As you know, we have embraced John Cotter's 8-step process for leading change as our change management process here in the department. So I will go through using those 8 steps, but today I will focus on the first 5 steps of the 8. And then as I come back and give you additional updates in the following months, we will continue to talk about the remaining steps, but we will focus on the first 5, which would be creating a sense of urgency, creating a guiding coalition, developing a vision for this change effort, communicating that vision, and then empowering broad-based action. That's within the department as well as with our external partners. I always remind everyone that we follow the 4 stages of implementation science. So currently we are in the exploration stage, which typically takes 6 months to a year. We are almost always on aggressive timelines, so we are attempting to do this in 6 months. But we are currently in the exploration stage. We are assessing needs, assessing our own fitness to be able to do this, and then considering our implementation drivers. So let's go ahead and get started with the first step of creating a sense of urgency to get us to this combined educator talent unit here at the department. We're going to look at 3 specific things this morning. We're going to look at a couple of other state agencies and how they have attempted to organize for talent. We will identify and discuss some potential pitfalls and opportunities that an internal group in the agency, they have already designated some of those pitfalls and opportunities. And then what could be some of the measurable outcomes and data points that we will have for this effort. In the report, these are some of the functions that Ernst & Young recommended we include in the talent unit. Things like the Ed Prep program approval process, educator effectiveness, talent monitoring and analytics, all basic leave and retirement related information. Currently in the department, we do not have a work stream where someone can call in and get information on basic leave and retirement information if they are a teacher in the field. And so you will hear in a few minutes that could be one of our pitfalls or opportunities, that having a dedicated work stream for that workflow would probably help this effort. We also don't necessarily have a workflow for talent monitoring and analytics as well. So of those particular items listed, of the 6, those 2 do not currently have a clear work stream in the department. But as you know, we have educator licensure policies. That work has been done by Tom Tomberlin and will continue to be done by Tom in that unit. And then, of course, we have licensure, which has been a standalone office in the past. So those were some of the recommended areas that the Ernst & Young report gave to us that could possibly go into that talent unit. But let's take a look at what Ernst & Young provided as far as other state comparisons. They gave us Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, and Tennessee. And certainly you can take a look that each of those states have taken on the concept of talent, support, and development differently. So what we have done is taken a look at what we currently have in place in the department and how could that match up with the states that have been provided. We do know that what Tennessee has provided, and they have similar student numbers, would include licensure, program approval, which would be referring to the Ed Prep program approval process, and then educator effectiveness. So as we continue to discuss how we move forward to combine these units, we do have our eye on Tennessee. And I know that was a question that was posed during last month's meeting. And we will start to have more discussions with Tennessee as far as how did they combine, what are some of their opportunities and pitfalls that they have seen as well. Okay. So again, I put the org chart back in just to remind us that this work will fit with educator recruitment and support, which is under my area, the Deputy Superintendent of District Support. But I thought it was important to share with you that currently the 3 items that are referenced in Tennessee's model currently sit in 3 different areas of the department, which was the point that the Ernst & Young report was making. So we had Ed Prep that was sitting with school research and data reporting. We had licensure as a standalone unit, and we had educator effectiveness with district and school support. So again, we would be taking all of these distinct areas and pulling them all together under educator recruitment and support. Okay. I'm going to pause to see if we have any questions.
Dr. Austin?
Yes, thank you very much. Dr. Petrie Martin, with regard to the state of Tennessee, what else do we know about their state education agency in terms of numbers? How many employees?
They do have quite a bit more staffing, especially in the area of analytics. They actually have an analytics team that is attached to talent. And so if you recall in our expansion budget requests, we have made that request as well, because we do believe that data is going to be a very important part of this process. And they are heavily invested in analyzing data, visualizing data, sharing data with school districts and charter schools to make informed decisions.
When we talk about data reporting, are we talking about, because we have so much data in this building, and it ranges from programmatic data to student data to attendance data to on and on and on. So are we talking about all data coming under one umbrella or something different?
So recommendation number 1 and 2 of the Ernst & Young report did reference us pulling all of our data pieces under one umbrella. But at the end of the day, whether we have folks sitting in a data unit or sitting within educator recruitment and support, we are saying we need individuals whose focus is on talent-related data. And I will say that Dr. Spano referenced some of this yesterday during the Business Systems Modernization presentation, where he talked about us knowing definitively how many teachers we have, who are certified, what are they teaching, and what classroom. Really drilling down to that level of data is also part of their project as well. So that work would feed into this work, but currently we don't have any individuals who could then analyze and then visualize that data so that we could actually give it to the LEAs and charter schools for use.
That implies a lot of knowledge about a variety of data, especially from being able to interpret the data.
It does. So again, we are recommending that ed prep, licensure, and educator effectiveness would all come under the area of educator recruitment and support as a beginning to this work. And I always talk about this in phases because we have to evaluate once we install, which we hope to install in May, this combined unit. We're going to evaluate, we're going to survey the field to make sure this is a good fit. And there might be other things that we would include in this unit as well. Keep in mind that beginning teacher services could be a consideration for the future, but we are focused on these 3 at this time. Okay. So I've already gone into a discussion of some of these potential pitfalls and opportunities, but I will review them very quickly. Of course, HR benefits and leave. We currently do not have that as a work stream in the department. We also have considered we may need an individual to address salary audit exceptions. Currently, we have a team of folks who do that, but not necessarily dedicated staff for that. And then we just completed a discussion on data analytics and visualization and the need for folks who can do that specific to talent. Seeking out beginning teacher coursework to support the new teacher induction efforts across the state. We have heard this as a need across North Carolina. We certainly have folks who work with school districts on making sure they have a strong beginning teacher program, but it would be nice to have some type of coursework that beginning teachers could have that would be consistent across the state. And so that is another opportunity we think we could accomplish when we combine all of these units together. And then consider how and what supports are needed for rulemaking. Ed prep and licensure, as you know, has some of the most significant number of policies that we bring before the state board. So then that has implications for rulemaking as well. And this was not only part of the Ernst & Young report, but it was also part of the licensure audit report that was done earlier as well. Okay. And next, we have to determine our measurable outcomes and data points. We know with certainty we will be looking at the licensure application processing times as part of this work. We will be looking at the approval times for licensure as well, and then the ed prep approval processing times. We know that those will all be critical data points to ensure that we're meeting our goals, but we will add additional data points, and we would actually love your feedback in this area as well. And then next, we know that we want to assemble this guiding coalition or steering committee for this work, and we have started that. But we really want to include the RALCs, as we know them in the state of North Carolina, the Regional Alternative Licensing Centers. Actually, one of our regions brought to us a proposal to take their RALC and make their RALC a part of the licensure approval process, and that was Region 5. But at the same time that they were thinking about this, we were also thinking about that because we knew that the RALCs were going to be doing different types of work because we are moving into the residency model. So we have begun to consider how would we include the Regional Alternative Licensing Centers as part of the application review process and approval, especially for those beginning teachers being hired by the LEAs. So we have consulted with our legal counsel to see if this is even possible for us to move forward, and I will turn it over to Eric Snyder at this time to give us the feasibility of making this happen.
Sure, thank you, Maria. Principally during this exploration phase, the question was, what barriers might there be legally or in policy to the department pursuing further consideration of this model with the RALCs? And as this board is well aware, you all have great responsibility under the North Carolina State Constitution to supervise and administer our public education system. Along with those responsibilities comes broad authority. Looking into the statutes in 115C, Article 17E concerning licensure, this board is again given broad authority and responsibility with respect to licensure. In particular, 115C 270.5, for those keeping score, the state board is tasked with, the State Board of Education shall have entire control of licensing all applicants for professional educator positions. This to me suggests you'll have quite a bit of runway to move forward with any changes in respect to administration of licensure. I don't see prohibitions here, I see opportunity. Of course, the board has worked with DPI in the past to memorialize its plans and policies and workflows here at the agency. So moving forward, looking at a new model perhaps with the RALCs, that may require some updates or supplementing of policies. For example, NCDPI has identified in a number of the licensure policies as receiving or taking certain actions with respect to applicants. That may need to be supplemented or changed, but that's certainly within the wheelhouse of this board to make any updates it needs. With respect to workflow, those things can change without policy. That's just the day-to-day of how the operations of the department work. As we move forward, as exploration continues, there are any number of models that the agency and the board could enact with the RALCs, and I think we would just want to paper those up appropriately with contractual agreements or memorandum of understanding to make sure that expectations are set and there's sort of proper workflow set up and expectations are clear. So I don't see any legal boundaries. I see opportunities for the board to enact these kinds of reforms.
Any questions or concerns?
Maria, I would like to go back to a previous slide. You don't have to go too far back. Actually, you may not have to go back at all. It's the ed prep approval process, the last bullet under the,
yes,
under sample data points. Is the department giving any consideration or any discussion going on presently around the ed prep approval process for changing the process or improving the process around program approval?
So I think recently Dr. Seiberg had brought forward a recommendation that was discussed, but other than that, I don't I don't think there are any additional ones, but through this process, we of course want to review all things that would be in this unit, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, and then we may bring something forward.
Well, let me just add to that. I know the North Carolina professors of educational leadership would like to see some tweaking done to the process for MSA programs. So Dr. Seiberg could reach out to them and have some conversations around that.
Okay. And then we always share that we're using the concern-based adoption model to always check in with staff and others to make sure that we're getting feedback on how we're doing this work. Keep in mind that we will have our first discussion with the RALCs on December 12th to begin this discussion of what this work could look like now that we have received information from our legal counsel. So this is a pretty extensive plan, but know that the work with the RALCs will be the first thing out of the gate, and we will work hard to get that established before we fully install everything that I'm presenting today, because we do realize that is a need, an immediate need for the LEAs. Okay. We will continue to seek feedback to develop this vision. We have 5 groups here that we will work with, but of course we will certainly add others, local superintendents, the Pepsi Commission, our task force on credentialing, recruitment, and retention, PANC, which is the Personnel Administrators Association of North Carolina, the Charter School Advisory Board. These are just some groups that we will take this plan to and begin to get feedback while we're in the exploration stage, and then use that feedback to create a vision. And then I'm sure you all are aware that Best NC has been working on a great deal of promotion around the teaching profession. And so we would include that as part of this work. Their Teach NC initiative would be a part of the work here at the department to ensure that we're all in alignment with getting the best teachers for our outstanding students across the state. We will have multiple channels of communication. As a matter of fact, we hope to begin LEA HR monthly webinars. So that would be with your personnel administrators across the state. And we will also be going back to a licensure guidance document. I believe the last time we had that document was around 2010. So we're going to go back to a licensure document that really helps people with how to implement the policy. This will be an electronic document, so it will be ever changing as you all change policy. But we shared the table of contents with the PANC organization recently, and they were overjoyed that we were going back to a licensure guidance document as part of our toolkit of support. And then also, we want to work with the internal staff at DPI to really hone in on some critical things, like how to use data, critical data points to improve performance, how to focus on results, how to communicate effectively, and we have to share leadership. I'm sure you're aware that when you bring groups of individuals together who have not been together previously, you have to ensure that you're working on creating that collaborative environment for teams that have not worked together before. And of course, we have a lot of the technical and process work that needs to be done in changing systems and structures. We have NCVIP, which is our performance evaluation tool. We have to change job descriptions, org charts, reporting structures. So there's a whole lot of work just to be done from an internal HR perspective to move this forward. We also want to update all of the staff here in the building on what this work is, and then also provide them with training on understanding human capital strategies or understanding licensure and EVAS data to determine the needs of LEAs. That kind of data would benefit all people who work here at the Department of Public Instruction. So we want to make sure we include that in our communication plan moving forward. And then for the last 3 steps in this process, of course, we have to plan for visible performance improvement. If the field cannot understand, see, and feel the change of a talent unit, then we have not achieved our goal. So we have to always be very visible in the performance improvements that we are making at the department. That is important to our brand promise to our schools across the state. We want to make sure that we're hiring, promoting, and developing staff who can implement the vision once we get there. And then finally, ensuring that we have leadership development and succession planning for all of the folks within that particular unit. So we have some next steps here. We have a lot of work to do in a short amount of time. We have to begin scheduling meetings with critical staff members in the building, set up a work plan for all of our deliverables. We know we have vacancies in some of these units, so we have to determine those, possibly reclassifying some of those positions to get at the skills that we are looking for. Then we have to consolidate all of those groups that we named into a single office and develop cross-training on some of the things that I mentioned. We also want to conduct evaluations of our current supports and services. The licensure audit was completed last fall. Ernst & Young took that audit and folded it into their recommendations, but we also will partner with UNC Chapel Hill to help us with a process flow review for licensure, because you can imagine there are many steps in that process. So they're going to help us just flow that out and determine if we have duplicative steps, and if so, how can we decrease the time that it takes. And then continue to address things from the audit as well. So we hope to install the changes beginning on May 1st, going into July 31st. And keep in mind, when we say installation, this is where we will install the changes, get the resources in place, prepare our customers, share the work, but then we're going to collect data all through that process for full initial implementation next school year. And again, we're just following good implementation science strategies here. Desired outcomes, I won't read those to you, but I've talked a lot about customer service, teacher satisfaction, improved communication, better alignment, and increased use of data. All of those things we truly believe will support our teachers and educators across the state, and certainly improve our brand promise here at the department. So I will conclude my comments and open it up for questions.
Questions from my colleagues? Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Beecher Martin, I just want to commend the work, number one, and just a clear customer focus for the agency on where you see the LEAs and charter operators needing support, and appreciate that, and also appreciate the kind of improvement science framework that y'all brought to this. Two questions that are, I think, kind of the in the same continuous improvement vein. One is, one of the great things about combining functions is getting that collaboration and work internally. Sometimes in organizations that can lead to a siloing. And so in an agency where there's a lot of dependencies on educator recruitment and support beyond just those functions, what are the kind of steps you need to take to avoid creating another silo within the agency, and that happens over there?
I think our town hall process that we've started with recommendation number 6 will help. The feedback we got from those town hall meetings clearly said that we need to do more of that, so that regardless of where I'm sitting in the agency, I know what is going on and how my work fits to that. So we will institute some town halls around this topic as well and keep those going as well. I think the second piece is also to be able to have this unit provide supports and training to folks internally. So for example, I mentioned that it would be helpful for folks in the building, especially on the academic side, to know the EVAS data by district, by school, because they're also providing supports that are very much driven by content standards. So, but at the current time, we're not necessarily spending a whole lot of time providing that level of training. So being able to determine the cross-divisional efforts that we can be engaged in, and not do it by happenstance, but be very intentional about town hall meetings and training across the agency that connects us all together. Right. The regional support structure has done a nice job in helping us do that, and I think we could actually fold some of that into that as well.
Mr. Chairman, follow up if I could. The other one is just, I think with any reorganization, there are lots of different ways you can organize agencies. And so the performance management side of it, to me, for us especially, is what's more important than how you decide to organize. I saw some kind of process outcomes or process measures in there. And I'm going to play my new board member card here. It's maybe something I should know. Is there an existing performance management framework we have in the agency that this will be able to fold into so we can look at what the outcomes are for the field, which is clearly driving the effort, so we know that, yeah, this organization and our implementation is working for our customers, or is that something we need to develop?
So it's my understanding we may not have one as an agency, but for each of the Ernst & Young recommendations, and I think that Dr. Spano might have mentioned this yesterday as well, we do know that we are being thoughtful about those at the beginning of each of these recommendations. So for example, surveys that will be administered that relate to the outcomes listed here to our charter schools and to our LEAs to get at, are we even hitting these outcomes? Some of the performance measures that are more quantitative, that would be included in that framework as well. I do know that we all rely very heavily on the state board's metrics that have been approved to also guide a lot of the work that we have in the department as well. So it's about having those metrics, and then the metrics that we're developing for our EY implementation, those have been the things that have really been guiding the work. But it would be beneficial to probably have all of those pulled together.
Thank you, Dr. Beecham.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Duncan?
I'm sorry, I'll defer.
No, please, Dr. Eisenman.
Thank you so much. I think what we're doing is wonderful, but I'm also wondering if there is, and this is rhetorical thinking, I'm wondering if there's some value in specialization, having units that are, and maybe that's going to be retained, Dr. Petrie Martin, specialized sections or divisions, units within the department. I'm probably not being
kind
clear.
of processing. So for example, our ed prep team would stay as a team, but they would be under a larger group, and they would also now be working with the licensure team and our educator effectiveness team. So they would all be one big team as opposed to being in different areas of the building.
But
is that what you're?
You're getting there, and I'm helping you with my, and so it wouldn't be as critical for the ed prep group to be savvy in terms of understanding EVOS. Would they? How deeply would they need to know EVOS?
I think just knowing about it would certainly be helpful. I don't know if they need to go that in-depth, but knowing about it certainly might be helpful.
Or being able to refer a superintendent or a teacher or a principal
correct
to the expert group.
And of course, it's our job to take a look at what duties are being performed and then match up the professional learning with the duties being performed. But if this is supposed to be a unit where someone can call and at least get their questions answered or referred, you would need for that entire unit to know what is going on in the unit. And if EVOS is part of that unit, then you would hope everyone would at least know something about it. I think that's what you're.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Duncan?
Sort of following up on the concerns that I know Region 5 has lifted up and you have been working towards, and thank you for the work that you're doing. It is very important. In our conversations with the superintendents around the state, this issue of timing of licensure is right at the top of everyone's charts. And so this is extremely important work, and I know you know that from your own personal experiences, so thank you for it. The role of the RALCs that you've talked about being expanded, if you will, and made part of the team in a way different from where it is now. What's the timing, for example, if we're trying to get clearance for new licenses for teachers coming out of school in the fall, and if that may be part of the expanded role for the RALCs? So for the timing usually would be this spring, which is slightly after your time frame. Is there any possibility to have that process going in the March-April time frame when it starts to become pretty important?
Oh, definitely. And so early on I referenced, and I probably wasn't complete in my comment, though we see the whole plan being installed around May 1st, the work with the Rauchs will definitely go first in the process. So we will start that conversation with the Rauchs next week, as a matter of fact. And now that we have some clearances from legal counsel, now we need to get the process flow and what that would look like. And then we have to communicate it out to our HR folks. I will tell you that the PANC conference is in April. It's in April of every year. And so our hope is to really have a lot of the workflow worked through by the beginning of April to be able to push it out. But again, we have a lot of work that needs to happen between now and then, because we want the process to just be incredibly clear. But we're going to jump on this one first and definitely have it done before May.
Are there any plans to use the Rauchs beyond beginning licensure and alternative licensure as we go forward in implementing the plan?
And we definitely could. As I've talked about, we really want to collect the data and begin to include them in the process, include them as a member of the team, and then grow this out over time. But we think this is a good place to start. In talking to our local superintendents, we know that is where their greatest need is, but we could always grow this out. We could.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay.
So I am here also to give you a brief update on recommendation number 6, which is the regional support structure, and I will not go through the entire presentation because I know we have limited time. But I do want to just refer to a couple of things in the presentation. So this presentation gives you a status on the hiring process for the regional case managers. Also, this presentation focuses on the response to the Superintendent's Association Executive Board. We have the opportunity to present this to superintendents at their quarterly meeting on Friday, and we had started working with the local superintendents and their executive board back in August. They gave us 8 very distinct concerns that they were going to have with this new structure, and so between August and November we were working to bring some clarity to their 8 concerns. So we went ahead and shared that in this presentation as well. And then also in here you will see the expectations for us to go ahead and install this in January. So I will take you to slide number 8, because the first few slides of the presentation, of course, lay the groundwork for recommendation number 6. This is our staffing timeline for the regional case managers. As you know, we worked really hard to get 8 regional case managers funded, and that has happened. So the first group of regional case managers will be onboarded January 7th. Then we actually had the job posting close for the remaining regional case managers on November 28th. We will hold interviews hopefully next week and the week after for those job postings, and hopefully we will be able to onboard the remaining case managers in February. We do plan to start professional learning with all of them in February, and then also introduce them to their local superintendents and their leadership teams during the month of February. And then of course we are going to bring in the regional case managers and the regional support team members, so the whole group of almost 90 folks in March, to do more extensive training on critical pieces that they would need to be a regional support team member. So the first few months of 2019 will be very busy in installing the regional support structure for our school districts. Okay. So of course you've seen this list before, but this would be the list of the team membership. And we also put it in a different visual for you here. And we are going to be asking many of our staff members as they present to you in the future, very much as Dr. Jablonski did yesterday. She included this slide to show that their work is part of the regional support structure. So we will always try to include that so you see the connections in the building. The next couple of slides, slides 11 and 12, focus on the feedback that we gave to the local superintendents based on their concerns. Not going to go through everything, but you'll notice that the routes and licensure was something that they had brought up during their feedback session with us. And then you'll also note that they really want us to ensure, and this is on the next slide, that this is not a takeover or a monitoring approach, that we really are there to help. And so we're going to make sure we're clarifying what the regional support team goals are. And they're really there to assess and modify services, assess the needs of the school districts, coordinate, plan, and provide services, and then evaluate the supports and services that are provided. Okay? So again, in summary, we are going to have one regional case manager for each region and 10+ regional support team members. We always put the plus because next year we do hope to add child nutrition possibly or transportation to this regional support structure as well. So in January, the local superintendents and others will receive the list of their regional support team members and their contact information. They will get a description of the work for each of the regional support team members and the regional support structure as a whole. And they will also receive a process for submitting requests for services. And that will kick off the regional support structure. And then we have a lot of work, as I said, to do the first 6 months of 2019. Won't read this to you, but just know that a catalog of services is in our future. And we're going to roll it out with phase 1, which will talk about the requirements for schools identified, and then we have a phase 2 and phase 3 part of the catalog, and that will include state and federal requirements and then optional consultative services from the department. And then we'll send a survey out to see how the first 6 months of installation has progressed, and we will use that data to move into full implementation for the next school year. And again, these are our desired outcomes. You've seen these many times during our presentations. And again, this should work toward our brand promise here at the department. And so I will stop here for any questions.
Questions from my colleagues?
I do. I have a question.
Dr. Oxendine.
Maria, I'm wondering, I will, seems like I always go back to recess in this discussion about our case managers and our movement toward the regional model across the state. Have the superintendents raised any, not really concerns, but have they raised any discussion around how the regional model might reconfigure or change the role of recess?
They have not, and the RESA directors have been a part of this from the very beginning. And as a matter of fact, one of our next steps is that I will be visiting with every single RESA and the local superintendent's councils in every single RESA. And we will actually be talking about the specific needs for their region, because every region will have different needs. So they have not necessarily expressed concerns. They have wanted alignment and involvement. Two specific things they've asked for is to ensure that regional support team members or the regional case managers are included in some of the job-alike meetings that occur at the RESAs. And then the other thing is that the RESA directors have asked to be a part of the LEA data review. And so we're going to start that process. And again, we're going to look to continuously improve this, but those will be our starting points in our entry into working with the RESAs.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none, Dr. Peacher Martin, we really appreciate your leadership on this. I think your tenure as a superintendent in North Carolina certainly gives us great confidence in your leadership, but also the confidence of local superintendents across our state. As my colleagues mentioned, second to the social and emotional health of our students, I think HR issues are the most common one that superintendents feel the need for support. And I'll echo Mr. Buxton's comment. Your service-oriented approach and open, transparent communication lends great confidence to this work, and we appreciate the opportunity to support you.
Thank you.
So thank you. Okay. We will now move to our committee reports. I remind committee chairs and the audience that all voting on consent and any action items will be done at the end of the agenda via roll call. And we'll start with the Student Learning and Achievement Committee, chaired by Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had a number of items yesterday and some good discussion. We have 2 items for action today. One was, both of them dealing with reports. One, our report to the General Assembly on broadening access to advanced courses, and we had a, I think, excellent discussion and good presentation from Dr. or Ms. Shaw Coltrane, as well as our advanced placement partner with the AP, on the kind of gains we're making and the kind of opportunities we have to continue those gains moving forward. I would, on this one, just ask if there are any additional questions. This is, again, merely a report we're giving, no recommendations as a part of it. Second item, SLA 2, is another report that we are giving that is information, no recommendations, a part of it, local testing. I appreciated Dr. Mason, Ms. Godwin, and Mr. Wallace's comments, providing some local context for local testing and some of the issues there. And again, we'll submit that report, and that will also be for action. The third item will come back to us next month. This has been an ongoing issue and a little bit of a cleanup of policy dealing with courses that students take that may aggregate to course credit, but making sure we've got the right standards in place with some different high school courses. And this will, we had good discussion, I think, yesterday, mostly presentation, but this will come back to us next month. I'm not sure if there are any other issues today. All right, and we had 3 new business items. I think a very robust conversation. Thankful for Dr. Chapman coming over from the community college system and Dr. Hall, who together gave us an update on where we are with the College and Career Ready Graduate Program, which will be required for many students in our state coming up in 2019-20, to help ensure that they are college ready and remediation proof. A lot of issues remain on that planning and implementation work, but I thought we had a good update yesterday, and I would commend that update to members, and if you have questions, get to Dr. Hall or Ms. Shaw Coltrane. The multi-tiered system of support implementation update, we had a great presentation, not only from our own staff, but also from Allegheny County, who, knowing a snowstorm was coming, still came down the mountain from the high country, and I thought gave us a very good picture of what it's like to do the MTSS work together with our department, and a good sense from Dr. Jablonski about the rollout of that work across the state. And then finally, Dr. Howard on the Innovative Assessment Pilot gave us an update, briefing on where that grant opportunity is right now. I should amend, it's not a grant, it's an award and an opportunity to pilot an innovative assessment. I think Ms. Godwin's comments at the end probably summed up a lot of feelings that folks had about multiple choice as an innovative assessment, and some concern that that was what we were kind of riding towards the grant, towards the award. I think Dr. Howard reminded us that that's what we can promise right now in the context of a competitive process, but there will be opportunities to rethink and potentially revise how we are looking at the NC check-ins and performance tasks. And I think, Mr. Chairman, that would be something that the board would want to revisit if in fact we're awarded one of the pilots. That was our agenda, and I'd open it to members for any other comments or questions.
Ms. Willoughby.
Mick, I just want to say one other thing about the innovative testing, innovative assessments, and I hope that as this conversation comes back, we will revisit the old North Carolina graduation project, because that was a very well thought out, well supported performance assessment that I think was valued by the communities that did it. And you know, we may be at a different time now when there could be some interest in reviving that. I'm not sure how many districts still use it, but at last count there were still some who were doing it, even though we were not allowed to require that. But that could really replace a lot of other assessments.
And the skills necessary were back mapped all the way to kindergarten. It's a graduation project with the skill set back mapped to kindergarten. So, well done. I think the participation rate was 92% at that time. Participation rate was 92%, and I think it's probably down in the 40s. now. Not tested.
All right, thank you, Mr. Buxton. Appreciate that report. Before we move to the next committee, I failed to highlight that the agenda item concerning a review of our strategic plan has been postponed to our January meeting. So we'll pick that back up in January, and just remind board members, if you have input, and I've heard many of us do, please get that input into Dr. Townsend-Smith. So now we'll move to the Education, Innovation, and Charter Schools Committee report, and I'll turn to Ms. White, the chair of that committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Amy White, and along with Mr. Wayne McDevitt, we do chair the Education, Innovation, and Charter School Committee. We have multiple items that we had great discussion around yesterday. Just as a review, we have 3 items for action on first read. Yesterday we had a presentation by our North Carolina Virtual Public School, the annual report, and for those that did not hear that presentation, we have 56,000 students that take advantage of that online personalized learning. It's such a terrific asset to the traditional approach to teaching and learning that we have. So we were glad to hear that report. I'll be recommending that we accept that report. EICS 2 was the approval of a lab school for the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Again, another terrific presentation about an opportunity to partner our university system with schools that target students who need some extra help. And so we're excited about that opportunity. We learned where there are other laboratory schools across our state that are doing well. And so upon the time to vote, I'll be recommending as well that we approve that lab school for the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. EICS 3 is the Global Achiever School Review Panel decision. I want board members to know that on Tuesday, December the 4th, a 3-person review panel convened to discuss the board's decision at last month's meeting. And the school requested the opportunity to appear before the review panel, which we did. We reported on that yesterday. The fact of findings were presented from both the school and the school system, or the school and the Department of Public Instruction. And in short, the finding and recommendation explained that the school's enrollment, unfortunately, does not meet statutorily required minimums. And consequently, the school does not comply with the law or its charter agreement as submitted. And so the review panel articulates the concerns about not only those issues, but some of the school finances and its facility. And for those reasons, today I'll be recommending that the board uphold the board's decision to, the review panel's decision to uphold the closing of the charter school. Moving on to our action item at EICS 4, the approval of the Innovative School District recommended school for 2019-2020. And I will call on Ms. Letisa Adams to come back to the podium to allow for any additional questions or discussion surrounding the recommendation that Carver Heights Elementary be the school that's selected by this board for inclusion in the Innovative School District for the next school year. Ms. Adams, if you'll come forward, and then board members, we've had a tremendous amount of discussion. We've requested a tremendous amount of data. Before we have this discussion today, I just want to inform the public and express my appreciation for the quality of the dialogue that's been held at this board table about an opportunity that's before us and before that school system to make some significant needed changes for students as related to academic performance. Ms. Allen, any questions for Ms. Allen this morning? Ms. Godwin.
Not a question, but I've been asked on behalf of Freebird to read a statement. That's okay? He's not here today.
Certainly.
Okay. I'm sorry for my absence today, but I wanted to share a few sentiments about today's Carver Heights ISD decision. First and foremost, this is an issue that is quite personal, as I have mentioned before. My wife, Kelly, attended Carver Heights Elementary and is a proud graduate of Goldsboro High School. I've also shared my opinions on Alamance Burlington's Hillcrest Elementary School being included on the short list of selected schools. Our community is relieved that our district's leadership was given the affirmation from DPI to proceed with the multiple programs we are providing our students at Hillcrest in the attempt to meet their needs. I want to start by expressing my agreement with Vice Chairman Duncan's words yesterday. I believe in the power of the community to provide the leadership and support necessary to serve the students of Carver Heights. I believe in Wayne County Schools and their appointment of Principal Patrice Basin as the leader charged with elevating Carver Heights to what we all believe has the potential to grow into. I believe in the noble aspirations of DPI and the innovative school district to provide the students of Carver Heights their needs. I believe the ISD desires to provide equitable and just access to the sound and basic educational rights guaranteed by our state constitution. But I believe wholeheartedly that this must be in collaboration with all parties involved. I believe that we move forward together collectively, and this is achievable if we begin a slightly different path. This is a precedent that can have unbelievable potential in working with school systems and their communities to create an innovative school operator that is community-based and decided upon by all those involved, including Carver Heights. We all want the same outcome, increased growth and access for our public school students. So let's build a path to this outcome with consideration to the voices and community of Goldsboro and its educational advocates. Chairman Buxton said it best yesterday. This is a competition that no one wants to win. We have the ability to change the narrative and create a process that builds up the community of Carver Heights and ultimately serves the students collectively and collaboratively. Let's begin here with this as our guidance and the true essence of innovation on our minds, in our words, and with our actions. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on Freebird's behalf.
Thank you, and thank you to Freebird for taking the time to articulate his sentiments.
Madam Chair?
Yes. Mr. Keenan.
I'd like to echo and chime in on that, on the conversation. Again, as said by you, appreciate the input that all the board members have really done in-depth discussion on this issue. And of course, as you know, Carver Heights is my district, and I've had a chance to be involved to some degree to talk with administration, staff, and community. I don't know where we go from here or where we are going, but I would like to point out that I'm very impressed with the changes that's been made with the school. You can't go back and say what should have been done a year ago. I don't believe in that kind of conversation. I like to deal with things the way they are. I have a firm belief or opinion that the changes that have been made are great. Number one, for the children. Number two, for the community. And of course, the number one is what's best for the children. And people have different opinions as what's best for children. I mean, even when you get in custody court, one person may say this is best for the child, that one, that, but you have to just do what you feel and advocate what you believe is best for a child or children. And whatever we do, I just hope that the destination puts us where we don't change what's there, because I think what's there is what's going to be best for the children and for the community, because we must continue to understand that community is going to determine what happens to the children. And how we get there, I don't know how, but I just want, when we get there, I want to be so that the stability that there would stay. I believe that the leadership they have now will make a difference. Track record-wise tells you that, because a lot of times you will say, what kind of person is that person? You know that by looking at the track record. And I think the people that have put in place administration-wise are the people that can make a change, people that believe in those children, because leadership is about believing. And I think that changes that are made, it dictates that they believe in the children. So my position as we go along would always be that my opinion is that what they got in place, I think, can work, but they need a chance.
Any other board member that wants to offer an additional comment at this time?
I just want to point out that this timeline, we talked about it briefly, but I want to elevate it again. This timeline is just unfair. It's unfair to this board, it's unfair to the state, it's unfair. And for the kids. And I hope, Mr. Chair, that we will put at the top of our agenda for next year's legislative agenda to address the timeline for this to come before this board in September. And for us, actually, it was before us as an action item last month. So for that kind of timeline, it's just not, it's not fair. And fairness matters. People need to feel that the process is fair. And it's pretty clear that regardless of what we decide, I'm really proud of the work, and Reggie, I'm delighted you elevate that, the kind of work that's gone on the last couple of months and where it stands right now. But there's still a lot of work to do, and particularly as it relates to the feeling of fairness. So I think that starts, though, with some changes around the restrictions we have with that timeline so that there can be some more opportunity for public engagement, true public engagement, for consideration of leadership kinds of changes and other kinds of changes. I will say that there's still some debate about the use of data that we have, and so even that elevates the issue of fairness. So there's just a lot of work to be done. I've got 100 pages of notes over here. I promise I won't read them to you, but I will tell you that I am concerned about that timeline as it relates to this, but certainly as it relates to the future of any consideration. The last thing I would say is that we often say one size doesn't fit all, and one systemic change does not fit all. And we should not be forcing ourselves as a state to find a solution that we're trying to force a problem into. And so I would just say that that we should be searching for the very unique circumstances, systemic changes that are uniquely favorable to the kids in whatever the school is that we're addressing. And I think that I would just echo what Freebird said and what Reggie said, and support that I think there's some opportunity here to do it in a unique way.
Mr. Duncan.
I think Mr. Buxton's remark yesterday of having a competition that nobody wants to win has resonated with a number of people. But I think our discussion has perhaps pivoted off that point. And the pivot point is we're now at a place where I know the folks in Wayne County wish we had not gone through this process. And I think the board members hope for all schools that not going through this process. But the reaction to it has been so extraordinarily thoughtful and positive in the sense that I don't think there's anyone on this board who doesn't believe that school's not going to succeed in turning around at this point. We now have in place in context a situation in which we have very highly experienced, in fact, highly awarded principal. And we're not just talking about experience, we're talking about proven expertise in these very types of situations. We have a community that's very much behind this school at this point, and there's the community gatherings and support have been clear to that point. So we've got, if we want to try to reverse the dynamic or conversation, we have a win-win going. We have, at this point, a community that's very much embracing and supportive of the school, put in context. We wish that we weren't, that some of that wasn't as a result of this ISD process, but we are now at a place where we have a community motivated, we have excellent leadership, we have a staff that is working extraordinarily hard and deserves a great deal of credit for the work that they're doing. So, you know, I can't envision a situation personally in which we would want anything other than what's going on in that school right now happening. And so that leaves us in this difficult situation. If are we at a place where we have to pick a school by law or not? And if we pick a school, then I think the question is if it's really a win-win, that the operator, and of course we'll carefully consider any operator applications, but the operator in a sense is already declaring the ability to operate this school with fidelity and with the kind of support from the community being generated that we all want to see in this situation. So as we move forward, if we are not in a position to do a waiver and we must vote, I think, at least for me, and I suspect for many members on this board, in terms of how we go forward with respect to this school, we should be going forward in a way that picks up on the tremendous momentum that has been generated in the course of the last 2 months in ways that are so positive for children, which is what we want. It's what everyone wants. Thank you.
Ms. Camhips.
I'd just like to say I concur with what Mr. Duncan just said completely. The local efforts are underway, and I'd hate to see us interrupt that and like to find a way to have that continue.
Mr. Ford.
Thanks so much, Madam Chair. We know everybody keeps talking about JB's comments, but I'm going to double down and say, not only is this a competition that nobody wants to win, I don't think you could look at any of the 5 candidates and not feel a tremendous sense of depression. That is that all of these, despite the best efforts, represent failures on our mandate to provide a sound basic education. So clearly something needs to be done. Something urgent needs to be done in order to equalize educational opportunity. The concern I continue to have is that the notion of something is better than nothing only works if the something that we're doing doesn't do more harm than good. Because if you do something and it ends up having negative growth or a deleterious impact, then we kind of, we reneged on our moral compulsion to do no harm. I share with my colleagues some of the same concerns about the community piece. I've spoken about that continually. I read an article not long ago, as authored by the president of the Southern Education Foundation. He was talking about how black and brown communities continue to have such an aversion to what is characterized as takeovers. I know we're not saying it as such, but when there's not community ownership and shared power in the decision-making and the accountability structures, no matter how we term it, it's going to feel that way. And so I don't know where we go from here. Some of the things that give me heartburn are sort of our lack of constraints or parameters around the open-ended aspects of this. There are assurances, of course, that we'll bring in community partners. To what degree, whether or not, again, there will be shared power in those decision-making pieces, I think, will determine whether or not we build on some of this community will that we're talking about, or whether it feels more like folks are brought at the table, but they don't necessarily have a decision-making capacity. And that, I think, is what oftentimes happens, is that communities get sidelined. They get told, well, yes, we'll take that into account, but ultimately there's no real leverage to be used. So beyond that, we don't have the track record in the state to look at, but when you look at comparable models, and I'll speak here about just my concern about the policies outside of our control. But since we don't have a track record in the state, all we can do is refer to similar models like the ASD in Tennessee or in other parts of the country. And I just don't see that this necessarily will have the impact. And in fact, I have concern that it will do what I mentioned from the outset, which is have a negative impact on the kids. And as Mr. Keenan mentioned, our concern, all of us, I have no questions about that, is ultimately the fate of the kids. And that gives me a little heartburn, it gives me a little worry about whether our attempt to do something ends up actually doing more harm than good, and ends up disempowering communities that really do want to take authority and wrap their arms around a school that needs some love and care, and it needs to help be improved. And so I would just lift those things as my primary concerns for myself, and I guess we'll see what the fate of the school ends up being.
Mr. Buxton.
Brief comment. If we didn't have a law on the ISD, I think we would still be very concerned with the 6 schools that came before us, and the one that we have paid the most attention to. And we would probably not merely take plans as the whole course of action. We would want to wrap some accountability and some support and some coaching around that, so that what we saw as commitments in fact turned into realities and in fact turned into outcomes for the children that we're charged with supporting and maintaining and guarding the right to the privilege of education. In this situation, I feel like, to our Vice Chairman's comments, we've got a really good plan now in place. And were the law not to be in place, the opportunity for our intervention and support wing of the department to work deeply and directly and in partnership with the county to ensure these pieces are put together, to provide the coaching resources to ensure they stay focused on those supports, and to provide some of the accountability to ensure that what we're seeing now, leadership has the power, are empowered the way they seem to be now, would be in place. And so we would be in a great partnership with a great plan moving forward. My concern about looking at other operators is that we then interrupt that progress and open up this question of, well, maybe who else might come in, versus from this day forward, the department with Wayne County are working deeply to move Carver Heights forward. So it would be my strong preference, if we could do it ourselves, that Wayne County would be our operator, or that the ISD would be an operator, so that we would have no interruption in where we go. It's not clear to me that that's a judgment we can make, but I just want to put on the table that would be my strong preference, and we would have a very, I think, articulated, strong partnership that a district would want to walk in with the resources we can provide and the accountability we can provide as well, versus one that folks want to try to avoid.
And that is a possibility as well in statute.
Ms. Godwin. Growing up, my dad was a Baptist minister, and he was a servant leader. He taught me how to be a servant leader. And one of the very first things he reminded me of is a servant leader is a shepherd. And the shepherd never gets ahead of his flock. Shepherd always goes behind the flock. And it's our job to watch for the pitfalls, to watch for the dangers, to watch for those sheep that go astray and bring them back in. I really see Carver Heights putting Patrice at that shepherd spot. I believe she's going to nurture and grow that school. And I just feel like we need to give her the opportunity to be that servant leader. I'm in lockstep with what Freeburg Anthony said, and I just wanted to make sure that I was going on the record. Thank you.
Godwin. Ms. Willoughby.
I won't repeat what's been said, but I think Mr. Duncan's comment about whatever motivated the change, and, maybe it was the ISD and, prospect, or maybe it was something else within the community. We don't really know, but whatever motivated the change, Carver Heights has made a lot of changes that line them up for success. And, I keep this little worn out piece of paper that's been on my state board folder for how long? 18 years. I'm going to bequeath that to one of you one day. But if what we're looking at is, children, and that's what we should always be looking at, what's the best thing for the children who are in that school right this minute? If you went in today and did the comprehensive needs assessment, what would it look like? What would the chart look like that had the missing columns that we talked about yesterday? Because there's so many things that have happened. The time frame was not in our control, I understand that, but it's not fair. We're not taking into consideration the track record that we all know, and I've also been here long enough that, Wayne and I were on this board when Patrice was the principal advisor to this board, so we know her from that role as well. I agree with JB. There were 6 schools on the list,
and there were many, many more that could benefit from our support. I think that our regional support that we just heard so much about from Dr. Petrie Martin is something I have great hope for, because she's a great leader as we take that work forward. But, you know, ultimately Reggie's right. At the end of the day, it's about those children and what's the best thing for them tomorrow and next week. And, you know, I think we are all, we've all taken this very seriously, as we do every issue that comes to this board. And, you know, it always feels right to do what's right. And I don't know how we make what's right happen, but I feel very comfortable that they are in a position right this minute, better than anything I could dream up today, to make that school success for children. And I know that sometimes we get in a box by things outside our control, but I'm one who doesn't mind getting a little bit further away from those cardboard edges and do what's right for children today.
Mr. Wallace.
I think I had to chime in. It's almost round robin around the table, but it's warranted in a situation like this. I'm on the Redevelopment Commission in Craven County, and we're charged with revitalizing the blighted areas, or what they would say the poor areas, of 5 Points in Craven County, especially after the flood. And what we found out in our research and talking to other communities who had successfully revitalized their blighted areas was ownership of the community. It's something about a renter's mentality. It's not yours. Okay, the renter's mentality is not yours, so you don't do the extra things. You don't build up the porch. You don't fix the backyard. You don't put a fence around it. But when you own that home, when you own it, it means something. And God's blessed me with being able to turn around 3 different schools in 3 different areas in Craven County. And how that was done was first going in and shaking things up at the principal level, getting buy-in from the community, and bringing in all those supports to make sure we took care of our children and give the children something to believe in. And it's hard to do that coming from an outside influence. It just is. Love the ISD to death. They're doing great things. But I would ask you to, with your vote, before you take your vote, think with your heart. Just really think that if those was your children, because I look in their eyes every day. Some of them, teachers and education, is all they got. That's where they eat at. It's their school. Something about being their school. So before you take your vote, I really want you to think with your hearts, not your minds on this one. Use empathy. Put yourself in the shoes. Put yourself in the shoes of that school and all those people that were here last time. They made a lot of changes. If it can be a co-partnership like you just said, then so be it. But they gotta have a stake in it, or I'm telling you, it cannot succeed if they don't. If it's strictly from outside. So just think with your hearts, ladies and gentlemen.
Dr. Oxendine.
I respect the thoughts and insights and the words of each of you. I truly do. And I know we all are here to do what's in the best interest of students, and the best interest of teachers, and the best interest of the district and the communities, the stakeholder groups that make up the greater community around the school. But I'm going to take a different take on the competition that no one wants to win, and look at this as from the perspective of the glass half full rather than the glass half empty. And I would, let me use this scenario, not an in-depth scenario, but an example. I think if we were to go, and pardon me for constantly bringing up Southside Ashpole, it's the only school we have in North Carolina in the ISD, so it's the only school I can point to. And it is near and dear to me geographically. It's down the road. Yes, ma'am. But I think if we were to go to Southside Ashpole today and talk to the teachers and the director, the principal, and the community of Roland, and ask them, would you like to be in this game? Would you like to take part in the competition to do some good things for your school? And these are the things that will happen. I think you'd have 100% at the beginning of the race line saying, I'm going to get in this race because I believe in it. It already is feeling good. I think I can win the race. So I want us to also, while I understand it being the competition that nobody wants to win, because it can be painful, and Dr. Hall and Dr. Allen can attest to this, going in those communities and meeting with individuals and trying to build ownership and trying to sell something that's new and different and North Carolina has never tried it before, that is, you've got to be a pretty good salesman to do all that. So it begins, I said earlier, last month in our state board meeting, the work is all groundwork. It's a ground game. It's winning over the community. It's talking about something that we have no data to support. But I will go back to my point that I made a couple of minutes ago. I think if the competition were presented to Southside Ashpole today, to the principal, teachers, the parents, and even to the students, they would say, I want to be in this race. I want to be in this competition, because I think it's going to make winners out of each and every one of us. We're going to vote on something sometime today in the next hour or so. And I know that we're all going to approach it with the best intents, go into the depths of our hearts to make the right decision, but also thinking about it logically and thinking about it rationally and thinking about it from the standpoint of what the law, what the general statute has directed us to do. And my other point is this: I have no reason to doubt that good things are going on at Carver Heights today. I mean, I feel compelled to get in my car sometime right away and go visit the school. I know. What's her name? Patrice, the principal. Patrice. She came over and chatted with me yesterday during our break. And she said to me, I want you to know what we're doing. And I says, I can feel that you're doing all the right things. I said, but those good things can continue no matter who becomes the principal, or if there is an operator, or if they can continue. I don't need to say anything else. I think I've said enough. I think you know where I stand on this. And I see those kids. I don't know them by name. In my heart, I can see them. And I know that they want something good happening for them. Not today, definitely today, next month, next year, and definitely in their futures.
Chair Davis.
I appreciate the comments of my colleagues, but even more, I have great faith in the board, the local board in this community. I have great faith in the superintendent. I have faith in the principal of this school. And if I was in their shoes, the way this process started, I would take it as a takeaway, as a takeover. If there's anything we can do to turn this from a takeover to a full throttle support for the board and the superintendent and the principal of that school, that's what would be, in my opinion, in the best interest of our students at Craven. Mr. Wallace, to your comments about owning, if this board picks Carver Heights, we own it.
Yes, we do.
It's now our school too.
Yes.
Not to take anything away from Wayne County. It is your school. But now we're in the game with you, 100%, full throttle. And the best thing we can do in that case, I think, is to support the efforts that are underway right now and figure out, one, how to continue to support those efforts, and two, how to turn this policy into a support for districts and schools, holding the transfer provision as a final solution or final act. So there's currently discussions going on in the legislature today that hopefully will give us that opportunity, but that's what I would like to see come out of this particular situation and situations in the future, because we've got 400 other schools that need our support just as much.
Indeed, yes.
Thanks.
Yes.
Mr. Keenan.
I want a quick 10 seconds, if I may.
Sure.
I like to say this on behalf of Eric, Mr. Hall. He's talked to me several times about what he's trying to do, what he attempted to do, and I want to say from the depth of my heart, Eric Hall has the best interest of the children. Now, when I met the superintendent, the first day I went to the school, I told him this when I walked in his office. I said, "This is not about you. This is not about Eric Hall. This is about the children." That's how I started the conversation. And where I say that to say this, that as JB said, and we move forward, it's got to be a partnership. Mm-hmm. So partnership means somebody else is going to be involved to some degree to work with you, as Mr. Chair said. So as the board member of that district, I told Eric Hall that I do support what he's doing, the efforts, the hard work, because he and Ms. Allen wants what's best too. That's why they're listing different options. So I want the community to know, and I want Eric to know, and I want Ms. Allen to know that we're all on the same boat. We're riding the boat for the best for the children, and that as a board member, I will support the effort of partnership. So that means everybody got to give. Everybody got to be willing to talk. And it's the tendency when someone comes talk about taking over or use that term, it's natural for someone to say, oh no, leave me alone. I'm doing good, I can do better, but sometimes it doesn't all work that way. So my point is that I told Mr. Dunsmore this too. I said, whether what happens in the future, I will be back to check on the school, which is a good thing. So I'll say that again today, and I told Mr. Eric Hall that this morning on the phone, that I will stay involved with that because I like to see the results. And again, I want to commend him and his staff for what they are doing, because what they are doing is a good thing. We just got to communicate more and make it work as a partnership.
Mr. Keenan, I join you in that commitment that the school that's selected today, I will personally commit to stay involved in making sure that in the spirit of collaboration that the board does have ownership. Is there any other board member or advisor who wants to make a final comment?
That's okay. Because I've heard so much of what I was going to say, I won't repeat it.
I totally agree. I could pontificate, but so many of you have said it so much more eloquently than I. So because of the way we now hold our votes, I want to suggest to you how I'd like to make this recommendation. Unfortunately, this board does agree that by statute, we do have to select a school. And that's something that, in summary, we have all expressed regret. The timeline is not a timeline that we would have planned. We know that there need to be significant changes as we make this, again, a positive opportunity for school to turn around in the state of North Carolina. So I would state the recommendation such as this, that the State Board of Education does approve the recommendation of Carver Heights Elementary as the school for selection for the 2019-2020 year, but that the board direct the ISD to exercise every legally permissible tool and resource in the toolbox to respect, uphold, and maintain the significant positive changes and the academic momentum currently happening at Carver Heights Elementary and with Wayne County Public Schools. I hope that we will have the legislative changes needed that will allow us to exercise that ability.
Would you consider some short friendly amendment at the end of it, just to add the words "and to provide whatever support the board can to further that purpose"?
I think that's an excellent addition. Let the record show that the friendly amendment is included in my recommendation.
Add another potential amendment. Could we make mention of community partnership explicit in that?
so I'm wordsmithing. Certainly, I think we need to have respect, uphold, and maintain the significant positive changes, and that the board expresses its intent to maintain its partnership and an effort to continue community collaboration around the support for the school.
Thinking of something a little more explicit than effort. Yeah.
That's fine. We're not going to vote for a few minutes, so there's time. And there will be a break coming up for board members to get together with Mr. Snyder and fine-tune the wording of that.
I love that. Thank you for digging me out of that hole.
You betcha.
Synthesizing the thoughts of all 15 of you. Anyway, let's moving forward with our discussion items. EICS 5 was the approval of the application timeline and process for the $26.5 million grant that was recently won by our Office of Charter School, specifically targeting how we can serve more low-income, socioeconomically challenged students in our state through the charter school program. EICS 6 was Moore Montessori's request to amend its charter to include a weighted lottery, again targeting our efforts to include more low-income, economically disadvantaged students in our charter school, in that particular charter school. EICS 7 was the restart application submission for Wayne County Public Schools for Carver Heights. And EICS 8 we actually did not get to yesterday because of our timeline. That's the Joint Legislation Education Oversight Committee Innovative School District Annual Report. Ms. Allen, are you prepared to give that report today? Thank you so much.
Good morning.
Morning.
So the report was submitted to you all about a month ago, 30 days ago, to give you an opportunity to take a look at it. So what it provides is a background of the ISD. It also gives an operational overview and summary, which includes the work that was done from the unanimous vote of the public schools of Robeson County for the transfer, also the operator evaluation by SchoolWorks, the selection of the operator, the community engagement and developing relationships in the rolling community, up until the first day and the opening day of the school at Southside Ashpole. In addition to that, we also included the process so far this year to date, our engagement with the Friday Institute regarding the evaluation of the ISD and the Innovation Zone models, and then also our next steps. So that's basically a summary of what you will find in that document. And so it is due actually to JLEOC January 15th. So today I am seeking approval of our annual report.
So this, board members, this item's a item for discussion today. It'll be back before us next month for action, so that then Ms. Allen can take that to the Education Oversight Committee. Any questions, Ms. Kamnitz?
If there's time, I would love to see included a little more information about what changes have occurred and what's actually happening at Southside Ashpole.
Okay.
You sort of stopped with the selection process of the operator, but if there's some information you could share about what the last 4 months have looked like, or 3 months, that would be, I think that would make for a richer report, and I personally would be really interested to read.
Certainly. I'll make sure I get that information in the document.
This is slightly a bit away from the topic at hand, but I want to please check and see if Southside Ashpole is doing NC check-ins. And if they aren't, they need to be doing check-ins.
So yes, I believe we did the first check-in. We may have that
The NC
information.
check-ins.
Yes, the NC check-ins, yes. But I'll
Okay,
double check
because
that.
that'll give us leading indicators on achievement.
Yes.
Thank you.
Board members, would you entertain the idea of actually inviting the principal from Southside Ashpole to join us at that meeting, since this has been such a widely discussed topic, and we could hear firsthand from them about what's going on in the school?
To be clear, by law, we are the board for, by law, different than all other schools in the state for that school. And if you look at that chart, it's got the superintendent and this board in the same box, and then it goes to ISD, and then it gets on down to the operator and all that. So I think that ought to be routine and regular.
Absolutely. Ms. Allen, if you could do that, that would be terrific.
I will.
We'd love to hear firsthand.
Madam Chair.
Okay. And yes, Mr. Buxton.
This may not need to go in the report, Ms. Allen, but I think for a future discussion, as a new member, I was reading it to look a little bit at some of the issues around operators. And my one-step reserve last year from watching it play out was kind of underwhelmed by the operators with turnaround experience that came into the process. And so I'm interested in what you all see as the challenges to recruiting operators with experience in turning around low-performing schools, especially given the character of the schools we've been seeing in rural areas. I know there are not many you can point to in the country, and maybe some thoughts for this board. Are there efforts that we're going to need to take, and maybe even look across the mall here to our legislature to help us recruit high-quality operators? Because Mr. Ford's point, do no harm is pretty important, and something is not always better than nothing. If the operator, we have no better sense that they can do a better job than the schools that have already in place. So something around maybe for a future meeting, just to understand challenges and opportunities with operator recruitment.
Yes. I'll provide that for you.
We can support you.
They are significant, so, thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Allen? Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Okay,
I'm so sorry. At the very end of the report, it references the evaluation design for the five-year evaluation design for the schools. And it says that was completed in September 2018. Have we seen that?
That will be presented, hopefully at the January meeting. So we will have the Friday Institute to come and present that to the board.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry.
Great question.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, super. So that is the conclusion of our discussion items. There are 3 items, board members, on your consent agenda that fall under this committee. We heard from them and you had the chance to discuss last month. EICS 9 is Westlake Prep's request to actually decrease its enrollment. EICS 10 is KIPP-ENC's request to approve an articulation agreement. There's 3 schools that are managed by that organization, and it allows for attendance preference given to those schools so they can move from one school to the other. And then EICS 11 is the Cooperative Innovative High School application approval. So those are the items that are on consent, and that concludes our report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. White. I'll now turn to Ms. Willoughby for the Healthy Responsible Student Committee report.
Thank you. With my Vice Chair, Mr. Keenan, we had 2 new business items, so there's no action, but very important, the Healthy Active Children report, which is an annual report. Dr. Essick always does a really good job of providing the highlighted data, but I refer you to the report because there is a lot of information there, and the important tie between student health and student achievement is never to be ignored. The second new business item we had was the safety app update. There are a lot of questions about that and about the options that exist currently and the options that this department and the Center for Safe Schools are examining, and the work around the Governor's Crime Commission, emergency management. So it was determined that this item is of such importance and public interest that we would like to have monthly updates on this work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Willoughby. I'll now turn to Mr. Duncan for the Business Operations Committee report.
With Todd Chastain, we lead the Business Operations Committee, and yes, we have 1 item for action on first reading, which was the Hurricane Florence relief adjustment that needs to be made for average daily membership decrease in the counties affected, as was passed by the legislature. And a plan was presented to us for how to do that consistent with the legislation that has been passed. We also had update on contracts, executed contracts report, and a planned contracts report. And I actually call on Mr. Buxton, who had raised a question yesterday about one of the contracts. The I believe you got some follow-up responsive information that was helpful to you.
I did, and for the board's knowledge, the question was about one of the contractors in our assessment system that has had some difficulties in a neighboring state. What we are going to be contracting them for will be different. And so rather than an online delivery of assessments that they've done in one of our neighboring states, they're going to be doing scoring of the already completed assessments, which is a different task. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm comfortable that those issues.
Thank you. That then brings us to the other item which we had significant discussion on, was new business. The board had asked for a report on business modernization update, and Michael Spano and of our department and Phil Emer of the Friday Institute provided a report to us in terms of where the status of that effort is, including what the approximate expense look like, some detail what the expense would look like on an annual basis, which will go through 2023. Some differentiation between what would be non-recurring costs approximately and recurring costs for this, and gave us a statewide look at the different systems that are already being employed and the difficulties but necessity for integration of these different systems, and the update being so desperately needed in that our present system is, to say dated would be kind in the technology world. It's apparently, the ice ages might be a more apt analogy. It's so that's a very important area for us, and I think there was agreement that we wanted to have follow-up reports on a no more than every 2 months, and when things are going fairly frequently every month. And right now things are going frequently, and some things are necessarily in a black box right now because we're going through a request for proposal period. And so I think the board expressed interest in continuing to be able to follow that process carefully and closely because of the importance of it to the operation of our system. And the good news out of the report is that it would increase our capabilities as a board to be able to access information for legislative reports, and more importantly for analysis of our staff to be able to assist in helping our students in a much more quick, efficient, and a manner in which we can have a high level of confidence, which is going to be very important to us as we go forward. So that's something that we should hear a lot more about. Also, we will hear about modernization for this building. That was not included in the report, but will be included in follow-up reports. And so we thank the folks who are working so hard on that, knowing how important it is. Last item is the Biz Ops Committee does have one consent agenda item for approval, which is of the LEA NC finance officers. It's not unusual for us to have an approval of those as they come up throughout the state. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Duncan. So we've been at it for 2.5 hours. Let's take a 10-minute break. And just to forewarn you, we'll come back for the Education Standards and Practice Committee report, and then we're going to try to take our votes before lunch, if we can. So that may delay lunch a bit from our agenda. But let's be back, ready to go at 11:40.
It's amazing.
Go, 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 go.
Say that's what we desire.
I'm a tea drinker.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Olivia, you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay. We are back in session, and we'll move to our next committee report, which is the Educator Standards and Practice Committee report, and I'll turn to the chair of that committee, Dr. Oxendine.
Thank you, Chairman Davis. I am Olivia Oxendine, Chair of the Educator Standards and Practices Committee of the State Board of Education, and sharing this role with me is Mr. J.B. Buxton. I have two items, one action on first reading, and then the second item is a new business item on chronic teacher absenteeism report, and that is the second installment of this topic. Dr. Cumberland will come forward in a minute or two and present that. But let's go back to ESMP 1, recommendation from the advisory board on request for exception from teaching licensing requirements, and that item was presented yesterday in closed session. And I have been given a quick summary on that. Everything that was approved, that request was approved by the state board. And let me back up and apologize for being responsible for restructuring today's agenda. I had to leave yesterday had an obligation back at my camp. So thank you, Chairman Davis, for allowing me to place this on today's agenda, and also to Deanna for making that happen. The second item is a new business item, chronic teacher absenteeism report, as I said just 30 seconds ago. We had our first presentation on this topic, several months ago, and since that time, there has been some follow-up by Dr. Tomberlin, additional data, additional information, and configuring all of that into a PowerPoint presentation that is coming up in just a minute or two. I do want to do a forward to this presentation by saying this topic of interest came to the state board, came to actually Chairman Davis and myself last month by the former State Board of Education Chair, Bill Covey. He had read a couple of reports, and I don't know the specifics of the report. I think one report was by the Fordham Institute, and he suggested that we take a look at teacher absenteeism in North Carolina to see if the data suggested anything that the state board could act on, consider by way of policy or some recommendations or advisement to the field. So we formed a committee, a small committee, made up of Dr. Petrie Martin, Dr. Tomberlin, myself, Chairman Davis, Alexis Schaus, and I don't recall anyone else. If I'm leaving someone else, I apologize. We met a couple of times, maybe more than a couple of times, and those meetings brought us to the point where we are today. I will let me make this statement. It's a very, very important preliminary statement to this presentation. By no means do we want to imply by the presentation of data that the State Board of Education is opposed to teachers in North Carolina having time off, taking sick leave, annual leave, professional leave. This is not the intent of this report. We know by law that our teachers, our educators, the North Carolina state laws give our educators opportunities to be out of school, to miss days of work. And we have that information is going to be presented to us by Dr. Tomberlin. So this is not, I don't even want that implication to even be hinted, because that isn't the purpose of it. But by the same token, if the data, and I'm not suggesting it will, if the data suggests that there are things that we need to consider as a state board, whether it be by way of policy or by way of recommendation, to help school districts, to help principals manage leave time, whether it be annual leave or sick leave or professional leave, then by all means, we probably as a board, being conscientious in our efforts and our thinking, we would be obligated to give some thought to that. And with that said, I will turn over the presentation to Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. Good morning.
Morning.
I'm very happy to return to you with more information about what we're defining as chronic teacher absenteeism. And it occurred to me when I was putting this together for this month's agenda that there are very many of you on the board that were not here for the original presentation. And so I included the original presentation along with the updates so that we could have context for how we approach this work and what we presented last time we updated, informed the board, and then what these updates represent. I know that we are on limited time today, so I just want to just kind of stipulate that the first 8 slides are a review of leave policy for the state. I am happy to answer any specific questions about leave that you might have in order to help you understand and frame the context of the report, but I will not spend any time going over all those different leave policies. Basically, you need to know that there are 3 types of leave that a teacher can access, 3 general types: annual leave, which cannot be taken on a student instructional day; sick leave, which can be taken at any time and does not require any kind of fee for the teacher; and then personal leave, which can be taken at any time, but the teacher does incur a fee if he or she uses that leave. So to understand how we talk about chronic teacher absenteeism, we're looking at sick leave specifically. And when we conducted this analysis, we wanted to avoid situations where there was a long consecutive period of leave taken by a teacher. That would indicate that there's some kind of serious situation going on with the teacher that required the use of sick leave. What we were looking more for is teachers who experience intermittent or sporadic absences across the school year, but exceed 10 or reach or exceed 10 non-consecutive sick days over the course of the school year. So this is kind of the target group here, these non-consecutive absence patterns that we can look at across the state. So I want to be very clear where it looks like the teacher was experiencing some kind of extended sickness, we avoided those situations and excluded them from this analysis. One of the things that we were surprised by in this initial pass was the high rate of teachers experiencing this chronic absentee definition. It's about 1 in 5 teachers across the state in any given year are what we would consider chronically absent. We also looked at the absenteeism by State Board of Education region, and you can see the Sand Hills, the Northeast and the Southeast have the highest rates of chronic absenteeism. I don't know why it's greater in the East than it is in other parts of the state. We're just observing that it is. We also looked at this in relation to school report card grade, and I think the big relationship here is not surprising that these higher rates of chronic absenteeism are correlated, and I want to be clear that I'm not suggesting causation here, with schools that have lower school report card grades. When we look at the the chronically absent teachers relative to, in terms of EVOS growth, we do see that a greater percentage of those teachers are not meeting expected growth with their students than those that are meeting or exceeding. And then finally, we looked at this by Title I and low performing status, and you can see that low performing schools are much more susceptible to the phenomenon of chronically absent teachers. And then the final bit of descriptives that we provided to the board was to look at how often is this behavior repeated. So in other words, it's one thing for a teacher to have an off year where there's a lot going on and they may use sick leave more than they normally would. So we looked at what percentage of teachers for 3 years, and here we used 17, 18, 16, 17, and 15, 16. That was our window that we looked at. As you can see from the chart here, about 5,000 teachers experience chronic teacher absenteeism every year of that window. That's 7% of the teaching population. And so that is particularly interesting segment of the population. What can we do to help these teachers not experience this year after year? And then about 12% of our teachers experienced it for 2 of the 3 years. And then on the right-hand side, those are teachers who entered in the 16-17 school year. We only have records for 16-17 and 17-18, and you can see that about 9% of them experienced chronic teacher absenteeism in both years that we measured. So that's kind of the lay of the land in terms of the chronic absenteeism and the descriptive statistics. So one of the board charged us the last time we came to this with kind of going beyond the descriptive statistics and try to report on some things we may know or understand, a little more in-depth analysis of the situation. And in order to do that, we took 4 distinct analytic approaches. And that is, we looked at the impact of chronic absenteeism on student growth, first within school. So in other words, well, let me just go through the 4 perspectives. Within school differences, within teacher differences, across school differences, and then across school differences, but now we're going to control for the differences in teacher working conditions for those schools. In other words, does the perception of the school's working condition have an effect on whether teachers are chronically absent or not? So the first analysis within school, and by that we mean, do teachers in a school who are chronically absent perform differently from those same teachers from teachers in that same school who are not chronically absent? And so you can imagine this would be important. Like we're controlling for the fact that you're among your peers. We're not comparing you to everybody else across the state. So the context for these teachers should be the same. And when we look at it that way, we find that teachers who are chronically absent score about 0.3 of an index point lower on the EVOS measure than their peers who are not chronically absent. So what does that mean? 0.3 of an index point. Now, statistically, this is a significant difference. There is a difference between these teachers. However, as someone who does training on EVOS, if a teacher came to me and said, my EVOS is 0.3 of a point different this year than it was last year, I would call that an insignificant difference. So practically, this is not significant. This is not a huge amount of difference between these teachers who are chronically absent and those who are not chronically absent. Next, we look at within teachers. And what we mean here is when a teacher is not chronically absent, and we compare it to a year in which that teacher was chronically absent, what is the difference there? So the teacher here is controlled for. Like, the teacher is the control, and how did I perform in a year that I wasn't chronically absent, and then again in a year when I was? And as you can see, that difference is 0.1 of an EVOS point. Again, because of the size of the data set we're using, that difference is statistically significant, but there's very little practical significance here. That is a very small difference, and certainly well within what we would expect a normal variation in EVOS from year to year. So these are just charts that show that difference for those two models, one that shows the within school differences and then the within teacher differences. That's just a graphic representation for you that we saw before. The stars there do show you that it is statistically significant. But again, I question the practical significance of this. Next, we looked at across schools. So if we control for differences among schools in the model, does there seem to be an impact of chronically absent teachers on this overall school performance? And again, we see a similar effect to what we've seen before. It is there, it is negative, it is statistically significant, but has very, very small practical significance. And so this raises an interesting point. Why wouldn't a teacher being chronically absent have much more of an impact on student learning? And my best guess on this is that what you're seeing here is the resiliency of the school itself, the other teachers in the school picking up and mitigating the effect of the chronically absent teacher. So this is good. We certainly don't want to get in the way of that. Teachers that kind of rally around and are collaborative and supportive of one another, this is a great phenomenon if that's what's going on. But whatever's mitigating this effect, we can't get past the fact that this is not having an impact that we should raise a red flag, or we should feel like this is an area where we can make a huge difference in the life of the students, not from what the data suggests anyway.
Dr. Tomberlin, if I
Yes.
could ask this question before you proceed, because you've used the term practically significant. Could you offer a little bit of clarity around exactly what that means?
Sure. So, try not to get too technical here.
No, please don't.
So when we think about EVOS and what differences matter, we tend to stick to those rating scales. Meets, exceeds, does not meet. Those are informative differences or practical differences between teachers. I am very confident when a teacher comes to me and says, I did not meet growth on with my students in fourth grade math, let's say. I'm very confident in saying what that means is your instruction is not moving kids along in that subject to the degree that an average teacher in our state is. And that's a practical thing to say to teachers. That situates them in a place of, I need to do something to improve, or I can affect some change. I'm not doing the job to the level that others around me are. When I say that however, if I were to come to that same teacher and say, even if I were to say there's a half a point, or there's a 0.5 difference in your EVOS from last year to this year, what does that mean to that teacher? I mean, it doesn't, there's no inherent meaning in that number. If you're not crossing that threshold where I'm confident that you're practically different from your peer, I'm not really telling them anything. I'm just saying, it's like I said, maybe like SAT. You took the SAT the first time, you scored 1100. Take the SAT again because you didn't like that score and you scored an 1110. That's a difference. It's a measurable difference, but is it practical? And can that student say they learned more than, or they're smarter than they were the first time they took it? I guess that's what the distinction I'm trying to draw there.
So a teacher could say, let's say a teacher, and hopefully we don't have many in North Carolina who fit this category, but let's say that we do have a teacher who is chronically, the nature of absences has reached the level of chronic. So a teacher could say to a principal, perhaps, it's a 0.303, but what does that mean in terms of my daily instruction?
It is possible. You're raising another issue that I think is very important. This is the effect on average.
Yeah.
Individual situations will vary greatly. So There could be situations where a principal sitting down with a teacher and says, I see you were chronically absent this year, or he or she wouldn't say it that way, but let's say that conversation were happening. I see you were absent a lot last year, and I also see you went from meeting expected growth with your students to not meeting expected growth to your students. Do you think, as a professional, that chronic that your absenteeism had an impact on the student learning? That's a conversation I can see happening and probably should be happening in schools, but from a 30,000 foot level, it looks very flat to us. Whether they are or not, chronically absent doesn't have that. We can't say that it's having this global impact on student learning.
We're sorry, your conference is ending now. Please hang up.
Okay. I thought that's quite a timer you have for me, Dr. And then finally, we looked at teacher working conditions relative across schools, but controlling now for teacher working conditions. So the question becomes, does the effect of chronic absenteeism differ by school, whether you've got high levels of, whether you got a high report on your teacher working conditions or low perceptions of the working conditions? Here we found no statistically significant findings. However, we did see that every one of the conditions of the teacher working conditions was negatively correlated with teacher absenteeism. And what that means is, in a school with high teacher working conditions, if a teacher is chronically absent, the impact is greater than in schools with low teacher working conditions. That is very counterintuitive. I can't say that it's statistically significant. I can't say it's practically significant, but it was consistent across the board. That relationship is negative. And I can't explain it. I think if we want to know more about this, we would need to do multi-year research on this topic. For this particular analysis, we only had 1 year of teacher working conditions to work with. So I don't have a lot to say about this. It is interesting that it's negative, but I can't make any definitive statements about that. And then finally, we looked at financial impact. And so just to help you understand what we did here, so we looked at when a teacher is absent. The teaching profession is unique among professions in that when you're out, somebody has to come take your place. You can't just be out. I can be out and my work will just pile up on my desk while I'm out. Teachers don't have that that luxury. Somebody has to cover the position. And so that represents absenteeism on the part of teachers during instructional days represents a real cost to districts. So one of the things we wanted to look at here is, does having a chronically absent teacher, what is the financial impact of having a chronically absent teacher in your school versus just a teacher who exhibits the normal or the average number of sick days in a year? So if you look there, we broke them down. In 2015-16, we looked at, is the teacher considered chronically absent? The average number of days missed for those teachers is 13. So teachers who are, that met this criteria on average are missing 13 days. Teachers who are not chronically absent, deemed chronically absent, are missing a little over 5 days on average in a school year. So you can see that's a huge difference. That's 8 days on average. And so what we did was calculated the cost. We used an average of the licensed and the unlicensed subrate. That's the 91.5. And we looked at across the state in 2015, the average, the annual cost to the state in substitute teachers for the differential there. This is the amount over and above the 5.9 is $16 million. Now, this is one of those cases where statistically this is probably not significant. Practically, I don't know how you get around the fact that $16 million is $16 million. So in terms of the budget, the overall budget in education, it is a very small percentage. But in real numbers, $17 million is a lot of money. We also looked at this including teachers who may take absence without pay, which is another way that, that teachers can take off time. And those are just slight differences there, but you can see what's interesting about this is the slight jump. When we include that in, it has a jump for those who are chronically absent, but a very marginal effect for those who are not chronically absent. So non-chronically absent teachers are not taking days without pay for their absences, but it does appear that chronically absent teachers do take these days in addition to the sick days.
Dr. Tomberlin, if I could pause for just a minute. And I'm reluctant, even though I'm going to move forward and do this, but I'm kind of reluctant to talk about data without all the specifics on the study. But I do, in reviewing some additional information around this topic in North Carolina, I came upon a study that the State Board of Education heard or authorized in 2007 on teacher absenteeism, and it's called a productivity study, and the amount per day, based on the same information that you presented in the slide, was, I think at the time, was running for the like $2 million for the year, 2006. They were reporting, basing all the data on the year 2006. The study was published in 2007. I can't remember the authors of that study, but if you do a search, you'll find it. It's a productivity, so the theme of the study, or this direction of the study, was based on productivity, teacher productivity. Mm. So it would be worthy to maybe find. Mm-hmm. Three authors of the study.
We could certainly look at that. Thank you. So, what does all this mean? Are there any policy considerations to be had here? So I want to go back to the point that I can't say that much of this has any practical significance, but in the investigation of this issue, I did come across, when talking with the districts about these issues, I did come across a policy loophole that I think is pretty important and that the board may want to consider. And that comes from a policy, extended sick leave policy. This is in the Employment and Benefits Manual. So the extended sick leave is 20 additional sick days that a teacher can tap into in order to preserve income in case of a catastrophic illness or a serious situation. The way this policy reads here, the part that's really important is that it says, teachers can tap into this if they are absent due to their own personal illness or injury and have exhausted all available accumulated paid leave. And then it goes on. That is coupled with this policy, an annual leave for catastrophic illness. What this does is allows superintendents to approve annual leave on a student day if the teacher is experiencing a situation that is, and the conditions are listed down here. Debilitative nature of the condition, the life-threatening potential, the duration, the monetary hardship, the expected length, and other options available to the employee. So that's very broad definition. The problem with these policies is that some LEAs interpret the term available to mean available on the day. If it's an instructional day, then annual leave wouldn't be available to you, and you could tap into extended sick leave. Other LEAs think that this means if you've accumulated it, it's available, and you have to use that first before you could tap into extended sick leave. This difference in interpretation yields to some teachers having access to an additional 20 sick days over the course of the year than teachers in districts where they have the latter interpretation. And so this discrepancy may be contributing to teachers taking more leave than the 10 in a school year, because teachers only accrue 10 days in a school year. And And so this may have some impact on this. It is possible to close up this loophole, or at least for the district, we would want equitable interpretation of the policy across all districts. And so one of the things the board could do here is clarify these policies for the field so there's not inequitable distribution of benefits across LEAs. And that's kind of where I would assume the discussion would lead. Is that something that the board would be interested in us bringing some kind of policy recommendation in this regard? Before I close, I would like to acknowledge the folks that helped with this presentation. Of course, Finance and Business Services was just hugely instrumental in pulling this together. They provided us with most of the data related to absences, and but for the follow-up here, we did get support from Dr. Timothy Drake at North Carolina State University and Dr. Andy Baxter, currently with Public Impact, who helped with the analysis. So I'm happy to take any questions or comments that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Tomberlin, and I'll turn to my colleagues for questions, commentary.
I got a comment.
Yes, Mr. McDevitt.
And I don't expect you to respond, but I want to just make a quick comment. If I knew someone whose role had just changed to be in a larger sense of looking ahead at teachers, oh, that's you, isn't it? That's congratulations to you.
Thank you very much.
But you've mentioned teacher working conditions, practical significance, the impact of this at the school and classroom, and the financial and extended leave. You mentioned there's also still got this policy of being able to give or transfer leave too as well. I think that's still in place, that the people can do that. FLMA needs to be, I think, a part of taking a look at that, and perhaps this. This is the part I really wanted to opine, and that is, I believe that if we packaged a complete local calendar flexibility law, a phase-in of a 12-month contract for teachers with a significant quantum leap in teacher pay, starting pay where it ought to be, probably around $50,000, a significant increase in professional development, remediation, the induction process that could include stipends for the clinical experience, and even sabbaticals for experienced teachers with pay. I think that we would find the results of being significant in terms of teacher shortage and many other things, but I also believe this issue would go away. It could be managed in the school building by the school leadership. You would have very little issues around chronic absenteeism, and to the issue of managing leave time with employers, it would be like any other, it could be like any other employee. It's not totally like it, but close to like any other employer-employer relationship. And we wouldn't have to worry about this. So that's my opinion. If you package that, I'd look forward to, as I go out the door, I'll look forward to reading about you putting that together.
And if that were to happen, we would have 3 million applicants at UNCP.
Yeah.
There we go. There's one of the results.
That would be a good thing. That would be a great problem to have.
It would increase definitely increase. It would give us, competitive edge then. We don't have one.
As a matter of fact, I'd go back to teaching 9th grade English.
And industry would rush to North Carolina to be located here.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And to our Principal of the Year.
Can you go back to slide 13, please? I just want to, that's the lead into what I'm going to say. I got a question for you.
I have to check my numbers. Which
one is it?
Slide 13 on your presentation.
What does it say?
You got the number.
School report card.
At the very beginning.
That one?
Yes. What happened in 2014? Something happened, if you look at it.
You see how the drop happens from 2014 to 2015 and 2016, and
I do.
each and A, B, C, D. You see that right there? Did we have a policy at the state board or something? Did we do anything in 2014 to make it drop like that? Just asking the question, because it's extremely glaring, and it's all the way in all fields, in all areas.
So leave policy wouldn't changed.
More on the LEA level, maybe? Was there discussions about absenteeism in 2014? And you see that correlation?
I
weird,
do,
isn't it?
I do see the substantial drop
Yeah.
in teacher absenteeism from 2014 to 14, 15 to 15, 16. Unfortunately, I can't answer why from the data.
Okay. I just thought you're a math man, so I kind of caught that. Okay. I would have loved if you could have, I would have loved to know you were doing this study because I'd have called you and asked you to do this. But it's one thing administration, as principals, we just go crazy over, is the frequency of being sick on Mondays and Fridays. It's just perplexing. It really is to notice how fast that happens.
It's not perplexing at all.
You know, I mean, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt.
So if I can speak to that just for a second.
Okay.
We did think about that, and really what we would really want to do is narrow that definition down to teachers whose patterns are largely taking sick days before or after a weekend or before or after a holiday. Right. So that, I think that's analysis that would cull down these numbers quite a bit. Right. And I have a strong feeling that the impact on student learning would go up tremendously if we were able to distinguish those things. But we can't do it in the state level data that we have. However, an LEA, such as the one that employs you, could engage in that kind of study and would have access to those data.
We have, and that's why I'm kind of so passionate about it. We saw the data and we saw the effect it was having on student learning. And we also, before I get to that, also notice how the absences as a principal, teachers are never absent when there's a field trip. Teachers are never absent when there's a talent show, field day, anything fun, we're there for. But if it's testing, we have a large absence because you don't want to sit in there for 4 hours and test. All right, it's just a commonality. I'm trying to complement your study. Implications for further study. I'm trying to complement what you just did. But what we call it was earners and burners is what we have with the problematic, the chronic teachers is what you have. As soon as they get it, they have 0.8 they're looking to take the day. I mean, there's something about it. We call it mental health days, but it hurts kids. And then later on, those same ones, once they get out and exhausted, they're always susceptible to slip and fall. And then you get into workman's comp. It's just one of those things. But in our county, JB, you know I'm telling. But in our county, what we do on Mondays and Fridays, you must provide a doctor's note unless it's a child or something like that. And also, you can't take it after a vacation day unless it's something in writing or what so have you. Leave without pay, you have to do 60 days in advance, and
how many days in advance?
60 days in that. Leave without pay has to be 60 days in advance, and that's for your cruises and this and that. You pay for it way out. You know, we don't want to hurt you on that one. But we have had a 40% drop in our attendance issues at in Craven County.
40%? You'll have to tell us about that.
And it's really common sense. I mean, if we're the only profession that you earn 1 sick leave and 0.2 personal per month. That is a lot of sick time. So once you get it and you have it, it's almost like having money. Money's no good if you can't spend it. You see what I'm saying? So just adding to and what y'all going forward, just know, I mean, my take as an administrator, when the teacher's not there, especially if it's a good one, the substitute's role is to maintain the bare minimum. Pretty much give them the alternative assignment, let them do it, keep them quiet, don't send them to my office. I mean, and be able to just keep the status quo, waiting for the teacher to come back. If you're chronically absent, that means pretty much the substitute's running the class. So it is a severe problem. It's been a problem. But no program, no substitute, nothing can replace a good and effective teacher. We need them in the class, love them to death. Take a mental health day in there, but don't take 10 in a year. You've only worked 407.
But great job on your study. That's just some suggestions I would say to Kirk Taylor.
Would you suggest that we further study the issue?
Yes, yes. I would help to advise
So
with you too.
if I may comment on Principal Wallace's implicating me in some things here, I think the big takeaway from what you just said is that I don't think there's a state level policy lever on this.
Right.
I think this is a local issue that
It's
we
not.
need to we need to make the LEAs aware of this phenomenon. We need to give them the support to conduct their own analyses and investigate qualitatively the why behind this, and then empower them to make policy recommendations to their local boards to stem the, if there is an issue, what kinds of steps they would take to address those issues. Yeah?
Thank you very much, yes. Okay, from the teacher standpoint.
Yeah, defend them.
No, I'm gonna say, just like in every profession, there are gonna be those people that do exactly what you
Abuse
said.
it.
They're gonna have the days and they're gonna burn them and burn them.
Earn them and burn.
I'm not a earn 'em or burn 'em kind of
You're not.
girl,
You're
and
not.
I have like multiple days backed up. I was talking to Olivia I think it was yesterday, and I said, I'm very blessed that I have so many sick days built up, and I'm saving them for my retirement so I can retire early. You can use those days towards, retirement one day. But this is the thing. It should be a localized policy. If you see that there are people on your campus as an administrator that is chronically absent, then it's your job as that administrator to sit down and have that courageous conversation with that employee and with that educator, because that is a discussion that any other employer would have.
Right.
And teachers are no different. We need to be held accountable. And in defense, I want to say that there are a lot of variables that play into these absences. I would love to know if, how many in that study were parents, were mothers or fathers that had sick children and they had to take off due to their children being sick. Were they a caregiver for their parents? I went through that a couple of years ago with my dad when he was dying of cancer. I'd never taken days, but I had to take days for my dad. There's a lot of different variables. And in relationship to this study where you looked at a teacher that was chronically absent 1 year and then not the next, and how their EVOS scores were different, you have to understand, y'all, every year is different in your classroom. You have a different mix of kids every single year. Your data is not going to be the same every year. I try to maintain that data, because I pour my heart and soul into it. But there are circumstances with children that, if you have, a classroom that, you are growing your children and it's all about growth, and they're not going to be able to meet the, that expectation because it's just not achievable for them. You're just going to grow them as hard as you can. The EVOS isn't going to reflect that. So I don't want us to put a whole lot into that because, the variables are different every single year with our children. And then in the low wealth, communities, it's very stressful. It's high demand. They get worn out. They get worn out. They have limited resources, limited supports in place, and truly, it makes them, physically ill. It really does. It's so hard on you, mentally and physically. So, I can testify that is one of the reasons why there's so many absences in those districts. They're just worn out. So even more reason for us to pour resources into our schools and to provide equitable opportunities, not just for our students, but for our teachers as well. I'll finish with just saying a good employee stays for 5 top reasons. 1, for adequate salary and benefits. They buy in for a company or a corporation that
shares their goals with them and their vision. They communicate with their team. They respect and they show gratitude. They provide a good working environment. If all those things are given to an employee, then they're going to want to work for you and they're going to want to be there. So again, we've got to, make sure that we're doing our part as a state to take care of our teachers and let them know that they're important enough to be in the classroom every day. Thank you so much, Ms. Willoughby.
Dr. Oxton, I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify one thing in response to, if that's okay, or I can.
By all means.
So I want to go back to the within teacher analysis. I think what was presented was that any difference there was so small that we would not call it of any practical value. So I wanted to make sure you understood that I wasn't saying that in a year where they were chronically absent and when they weren't, that there was this huge discrepancy.
Right, and I got that. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was reminded that it's not like a normal job where, it's consistent every day you walk in the door. In schools, every day is different. Every minute can be different. It's lots of different variables in play all the time. So just want to make sure they know.
The other thing that I'm very concerned about is when we talk about low performing schools or high minority, high poverty schools, I think sometimes there's a tendency to refer to them as, or to think of them as crucibles, and that we can excuse some things because of the harsh conditions. And I would be very concerned about even suggesting those kinds of descriptions of these schools, because if that messaging is coming from the state, that these are more difficult situations, that they're impossible situations, then we're contributing to the human capital difficulties that those schools are experiencing. And I try to be very sensitive to this and understand that if they're different, we need to make sure that they're more like other schools, so that we need to address those conditions rather than create situations where we accept or excuse behavior that we wouldn't find acceptable in another school.
Totally agree. That's why I said we need to pour resources and supports for those, and use these studies to dig deeper and see, is it that there's a lack of resources in these areas? Is it lack of supports? And then pour it into them and see if the data changes.
Lisa, I would say, and as the chair, I probably shouldn't join in this conversation as much, but I will say that the financial implications are probably greater in our low wealth districts, and that we also see from the data that we have maybe too many incidences of absenteeism among our educators. So it's almost like the resources that are there are being drained to answer other questions like substitute pay, training substitutes, retraining substitutes, finding substitutes, and the toll it takes on the operations of the school in terms of having lots of substitute teachers in the building on any given day of the week. And with that said, Ms. Willoughby.
Just a couple of quick comments. It occurred to me when we were talking about this, and as I look around this table, none of us are practicing educators anymore. Some of us have been, other than our folks down at the end of the table. But every month we bring in these fabulous teachers and administrators and do what we did this morning and take photos with them and recognize them for great achievements. And it occurs to me that maybe a creative thing that might happen in 2019 would be to get that group of teachers together for an hour while they're in Raleigh, they're in this building, and talk to them, get some feedback, get some discussion about issues, whether it's chronic absenteeism and their thoughts about that, or other issues that we grapple with that are absolutely impossible for us to understand in the same way. We're lucky to have a couple of teachers of the year, as board advisors, but I just thought, here we have this opportunity every month. They're right here in the building. Let's grab that brain power. And the second thing I would say about chronic absenteeism is, you know, yesterday when we did our Healthy Active Children report, there was a slide about employee wellness. And, you know, that is an issue. And when you look at some of the districts and you look at access to health care, you know, I live in Raleigh, that's not an issue for me, but look at access to health care. And, you know, we have, in this state, made a decision not to expand Medicaid when that could be a very helpful, a tool that many of our districts could use. So, you know, the stress, the mental health, I mean, we talked about that yesterday. You know, what pops up as a big concern is mental health now. Well, don't discount our employees are dealing with that, whether it's with students or families or whatever it is. I mean, there are a lot of issues at stake, but I just think, you know, one solution, one partial solution might be let's corral that brain power of those teachers when they're here, and you know, they're the ones we want to replicate, right? We're taking pictures with them because we're proud of what they're doing. So let's find out what they know.
Vice Chair Duncan.
Very quickly, not surprising to everybody around this table, not all our facilities are brand new. Some of them are in fact very old, and I think it would be interesting to have some correlations done on chronic absenteeism with some air quality, water quality studies, and some studies about the regularity of the HVAC systems in some of the older facilities when one is teaching with a winter coat on all for several months. It perhaps can alter the propensity to get sick for not just the teacher but for the students, and I think that's also sometimes, occasionally, has been part of a problem and helps us understand bigger problems.
I'm happy to work with the Chief Operations Officer on that question.
Other comments or questions? This was a very good discussion, a very good report. Thank you so much for working at making it happen. And I think our homework is to say to you what we would like for you to do, Dr. Tomberlin, is come back at some point, not necessarily next month, but with some recommendations on ways that we can change the perhaps the language of policy.
We will bring you recommendations for closing this loophole, and we will discuss the matter with the field before we bring a recommendation back to you.
And I do have one final question, and I'll turn to the principal of the year. So teachers can be out of school for cruises?
No. No. What I was saying is, let's say we hire a teacher. All right, we hired the teacher in August. She had already paid. Cruises you usually put way out, like in December or January. And that is a leave without pay. Unless you have personal leave and want to use that, that's leave without pay. But that's not granted. Again, in my county, you have to write that up 60 days in advance, put that in, so we're prepared for that.
Thank you so much for that clarification. Thank
Yeah.
you. That
Glad we got that clear.
I was getting ready to write that out. Okay, so, and there is one item, Chairman Davis, under the consent item, my consent item, and it pertains to, it's ES&P 2, TCED 0, this was presented to the State Board last month, and TCED, Teacher Education 009, that language has been changed to TC 009.
There are 2 participants on the call, including you. You are joining your conference as the host. For a menu of available commands, press *#.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine.
Has joined the conference. A participant has joined the conference.
Okay. So before we proceed to our voting items, I'd like to remind board members that there is a Computer Science for North Carolina expo presentation downstairs with students from kindergarten through 12th grade, which I think is an extraordinary event. And please take the opportunity at the conclusion of our meeting to go down to room 150, and anyone in the audience that would like to go down. I think it's a terrific opportunity to see some of the amazing things that our students and teachers are delivering in terms of computer science across our state. In addition, the Lieutenant Governor asked if I'd share this development. The you know, he chairs the Special Committee on Digital Learning and has suggested that digital learning committee include computer science, which I think is a worthy idea. In addition, the superintendent has announced the addition of a director of computer science as a position within DPI, and that position would also work with the special committee on digital learning and computer science. And I think that's a really good step in terms of DPI staff and a board committee working together. I think that's proven to be a successful model. So sharing that update with you. So now we'll come to our consent agenda, and I note to the audience that the consent agenda is primarily items that have come to the board for discussion in a prior month that are not complex items. I note also that board members have seen these consent agenda materials for at least a week. If there is no request to remove an item from consent, I seek a motion to approve SLA 4, BizOp 2, EICS 9 through 11, and ESNP 2 on the consent agenda. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Dr. Oxendine, a second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Kamitz. Dr. Townsend Smith, will you call the roll to capture the vote?
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Dr. Oxendine?
Yes.
Ms. Kamnitz?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Mr. Chastain?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Treasurer Falwell? Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Chair Davis?
Yes. Great, motion carries. Thank you. Now we'll move to a vote on items requiring action from your committee reports. A thorough discussion and report was provided on each of these items. So I'll ask for a motion to approve the October 30th through November 1st, 2018 and November 30th, 2018 meeting minutes. SLA 1 and 2, action and action on first reading items. BizOp 1, action on first reading item, and EICS 1 through 3, action and action on first reading items. This does not include the ISD item, which will be taken up separately. So is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Willoughby,
Second.
second. Second by Ms. White. Any questions on this motion before we vote? Seeing none, Dr. Townsend Smith, would you call the roll?
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Dr. Oxendine?
Yes.
Ms. Kamnitz?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Mr. Chastain? Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Chair Davis?
Yes. Motion carries. We'll now proceed to our final item, which is EICS 4, and I'll turn to Ms. White to make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will read this twice because we did add some language to incorporate board sentiments. So, Mr. Chair, I move that the State Board of Education approve the ISD superintendent's recommendation to transfer Carver Heights Elementary into the Innovative School District, and I further move that the board direct the Innovative School District to exercise every legal permissible avenue to respect, uphold, maintain the significant positive academic and leadership changes undertaken by Wayne County Public Schools at Carver Heights Elementary, and that the board direct the Innovative School District to engage the local Wayne County Board, families, students, educators, and the community in shared decision-making power through state, school, and district governance, as well as other accountability structures. I'll repeat that last part because this is what we added to incorporate things that were added at the table. And that the board direct the Innovative School District to engage the local Wayne County Board, families, students, educators, and the community in shared decision-making power through state, school, and district governance, as well as accountability structures.
Is there a second?
I second.
Second by Dr. Oxendine. Any questions or comments on the motion?
Sure.
Mr. Buxton?
I just want to understand, and if you could read not the very first part of the motion, but the I further move part, and I've got a question on that part.
Okay. That the board direct the Innovative School District to exercise every legal, permissible avenue to respect, uphold, and maintain the significant positive academic and leadership changes undertaken recently by Wayne County Public Schools at Carver Heights Elementary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is, I hear the intent of that motion as a preference for considering, or a preference for the district as an operator. I'm comfortable with that. If we're not saying that, I'm trying to understand what the motion is suggesting. If that's not the intent of the motion, to express a preference before we come to that decision, that we're able to consider that in our selection of the operator.
In response to that, I would say that every legally permissible avenue is a nod towards, should changes be made at the General Assembly today, that the individual LEA can be an operator, that would be something that we might exercise in order to respect, uphold, and maintain the significant positive academic and leadership changes. I would also say, to be fair, that using the ISD as an operator also provides that opportunity.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Ford?
Clarifying question. So who chooses ultimately the operator?
This board.
Just wanted to be clear on it. Okay.
In a separate decision.
Other questions? Vice Chair Duncan?
Although these words are not expressly in the motion, I think the intent of the motion, the intent of the comments have been made. It would be the intent of this board, and I'm not suggesting an amendment to it, but that motion encompasses, I believe, the intent of this board to serve as a vehicle for support to assist what's being done in Wayne County, in the Wayne County schools, and to be a partner in that support with the Wayne County Board, who we strongly support the changes in the work that they're doing, as well as the school leadership in Wayne County, and we commend them for the work that they've been doing. I think it's been a gist of what's behind the language in the motion. I say that not to ask for an amendment, but just to make sure that I think I'm stating what I think we believe.
Mr. Keenan?
Well said, Mr. Duncan. I appreciate that. I agree with you. Whatever we do, we want to stay involved of this board and with that situation.
Any other comments? Dr. Townsend Smith, call the roll.
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Dr. Oxendine?
Yes.
Ms. Kamnitz?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Mr. Chastain? Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Chair Davis?
Yes. Motion carries. That concludes our items to vote on today. I want to thank all staff and presenters for this December 5th and 6th, 2018 meeting. And now I'll entertain before I entertain a motion to adjourn. Board members, I want to wish each of you and our staff happy holidays and a pleasant new year. We'll look forward to reconvening in the new year, recharged and ready to go for our students. So may I have a motion to adjourn? That's the extent of it, yes.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Buxton, is there a second? Second by Mr. Keenan. Dr. Townsend Smith.
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Dr. Oxendine?
Yes.
Obviously.
Ms. Kamnitz?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Mr. Chastain? Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Chair Davis?
Yes. We are adjourned.